Welcome, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for being here, to those of you in person, to those who are joining live streaming. Please forgive me, I'm a bit distracted. There's some activity going on just outside the room. It's a little bit loud. I hope everybody can hear okay. Let's see. So we will start with our Pledge of Allegiance, and I will ask our student board member to lead us. The board has been meeting in closed session regarding matters listed on today's agenda. The board took no reportable action. Next, we have adoption of the agenda, and before we do that, there's a slight modification. So on item 16.5, the title of the agenda item should read School Closure Information. And we will strike the term expansion of dual enrollment. And aside from that title, there are no other changes to that item. So we need a motion to accept the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? And our student board member?
Aye.
So that passes 5-0 with a preferential vote. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our student representative from Jordan, the ASB president, Julieta Cardenas Vidal. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Baker, board members, LBUSD staff, and guests. My name is Julieta Cardenas Vidal, and I'm honored to represent Long Beach Jordan High School as this year's proud ASB president. As a senior, I want to share some of the incredible things happening at our school, both in academics and athletics, because they highlight the dedication, spirit, and success of our students and staff. Before I dive into further business, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm a student in the Ames pathway at Jordan High School and actively involved in Ames Club, HOSA, Principal Advisory, RSVP Superintendent Board, and CSULB Upward Bound Program. Outside of academics and leadership, I stay active as a student athlete, having played flag football and beach volleyball. Being a part of these programs and activities has given me the chance to see and experience a little bit of everything, and I'm excited to bring my perspective and energy to this council. One of the things that makes Jordan High School so special is its variety of pathways, each designed to prepare students for college and careers while supporting a wide range of interests. For instance, Ames Academy focuses on healthcare careers like medicine and nursing, offering hands-on experiences in health sciences, along with internships your senior year. ACE Academy partners with the Port of Long Beach to provide opportunities in advanced manufacturing, construction, and engineering, with access to field trips, industry speakers, and scholarships. JMAC Pathway centers on media photography, video production, and digital arts, fostering creativity and storytelling skills. LEAPS Pathway prepares students for careers in law enforcement, firefighting, and public service with foundational knowledge and professional engagement. Each pathway combines academics with real-world experiences tailored to student interests, and I'm proud to say Jordan truly has something for everyone. Now moving on to our attendance and academics. This year, Jordan High School is proud to serve 2,236 scholars who are working hard to achieve academic success. Attendance plays a critical role in that success, and at Jordan, we strive for 95% of attendance or more. Many of our students are meeting or even exceeding this goal. In September, 1,632 students achieved 95% or higher attendance. And in October, 1,445 students reached this milestone. Additionally, 1,129 students in September and 914 students in October had perfect attendance, never missing a single day of school. Even more impressively, 375 students in September and 290 in October achieved flawless attendance, meaning they haven't missed a day, been late, or skipped a class. These numbers highlight the dedication. These numbers highlight the dedication of our students and the support they receive from teachers and staff. At Jordan, we recognize that showing up is the first step towards success, and we're proud to celebrate students who make attendance a priority. Beyond attendance, Jordan has also made strides in fostering stronger connections with families. This school year, we opened up a new parent center, a welcoming space designed to strengthen the partnership between families, our school, and the community. The Parent Center serves as a hub for family engagement and support, offering access to technology and student portals, so parents can stay connected to their child's academic progress. Assistance with school forms, communication tools, and district resources. Workshops and informational meetings such as sessions on ParentView and Canvas to help families navigate school systems and support their students. This fall, Jordan hosted workshops through the Equity Engagement and Partnerships Office, including the LBUSD 101 Navigating Our School System workshop, which helped families better understand how to access district portals and resources. These efforts reflect our commitment to ensuring that families are empowered to support their children's academic journeys. Alongside our academic achievements, Jordan Athletics has been thriving. We've been fortunate to have the new blue turf, which has brought excitement and pride to our campus and community. Our football and flag football teams had amazing seasons, with flag football making history by qualifying for CIF for the first time ever and advancing past the first round. As winter sports kick off, we're continuing to build our girls' water polo program and are excited to start hosting soccer games on the new soccer field. These opportunities wouldn't be possible without the support of LBUSD leadership, and I want to thank them for helping us navigate facility renovations and growing our athletic programs. Jordan is a place where athletes can thrive, and I'm so proud to be a part of this community as both a leader and athlete. This is only the beginning for Jordan High School. With a community that supports growth, achievement, and excellence, I know that our future is bright. Don't forget to keep your eye on the north. Thank you, and let's continue to make history together.
So, Julieta, first I want to thank you for speaking loudly, because you have to speak over a lot of the activity that's going on outside. But I don't remember hearing your personal plans. You did mention you're a senior, so I think we'd be interested to hearing about your personal plans for next year.
I plan to attend a four-year university and major in human biology to become a dentist. Yeah.
That's fabulous. And also, would you like to acknowledge anybody who is here to support you? I couldn't help but notice the Jordan blue coming into the room. It's a very distinctive blue.
Yes, I have my amazing supportive people, our principal, Miss Irving, Miss Galbraith, an assistant principal, Miss Castro, our office, she's up there, she's the admin, Miss Green, our activities director, and our ASB vice president.
Okay, I believe we're going to take a pause. I'm going to look to, we have sorry.
So I got a couple questions for you. The first one was centered around, so you say you're going to want to go to a four-year university. I'm a big believer in speaking things into fruition. So what is your dream school?
USC.
There we go. Do you hear that? Do you hear that? I can tell. You're just a really smart lady. I'm so proud of you. All right. The second question. So I'm a girl dad.
Okay.
Juan's also a girl dad. And we were talking about another flag football player. And this sport is just blowing up. What about flag football? Were you excited about? Why did you even sign up for flag football, just out of curiosity?
Well, previously I was playing indoor volleyball, and I just felt like I was pretty quick to be running in between the court. I needed a bigger space, so I was like, why not just go to the field?
So you want to show off the wheels, is what you were saying. Gotcha.
Okay. Yes.
I just want to congratulate you. You represent Jordan very well, and I have to say, every time I've been at Jordan, what is most impressive are like the great, smart, intelligent, just kind students that Jordan has, and that is attributed to the great staff there. So, great job.
Thank you.
And good luck. And if you want to go to SC, I'm a Bruin, but you know what? Great school.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, in that case, what we have you do is come up and join us, then we're going to do pictures. So we'll just take a little pause to do that. And now we will continue hearing from our students with our student board member Nwala.
Thank you, President Craighead. Just taking from the lovely student leadership that we've seen tonight, I wanted to talk a bit about McBride Site Night that happened this past Monday, actually. This is McBride Blue. I know that we look a little like Jordan, but this is McBride Blue. Amazing that I wore it, though. So I wanted to talk about McBride Site Night. That was this past Monday, and we saw an amazing show out of student leadership. Our school believes very strongly in putting our student leaders to lead every event. And so we had that this year, where every single activity was led by our student leaders. We set up the whole thing, we planned the whole thing, and we had the amazing opportunity of executing it. And so to see all the parents come out and say how much they loved hearing from students and hearing our lived experiences and making all of their students want to come to our school. And I know that that was something that carried across the district, as I went to Sato Site Night as well, and that was something that they did as well. And additionally, I wanted to talk about an exhibit at the African American Cultural Arts Center of Long Beach, featuring my school's namesake, Ernest McBride Sr. That exhibit will be open until December 1st, so I encourage you all to check it out. It's truly amazing and highlights such a wonderful activist and leader in our Long Beach community. That's it. Thank you all so much.
Student board member Nwala,
Thank you.
can you also just share briefly about the multicultural fair that you participated in at your school?
Of course. Okay, so I talked a bit about this in my last student board member report. So we had our cultural fair, which is the first one we did this year. We hosted an event that shared about every cultural background at our school. We had Khmer representation, we had Vietnamese representation, we had African American representation, and we shared food, culture, games, and things of the sort. And it was truly an amazing experience having our students come together and share their cultures, getting to know more about one another and more about our cultures and backgrounds as well.
So if other students wanted to know more about it, could they contact you?
Please
directly?
do. I encourage you to. My email is, I'm sure, somewhere out there. If not, it's cnwala@lbschools.net.
Thank you. It's always wonderful to hear about what's going on, and not just from our student reps, but our student board member. So thank you for that. Let's see, and next I will have us turn our attention to the screen for our vision in action.
They be like, hey, he's getting taller every day. I wish I could stop growing, but not in the skill set that I'm developing over the time span.
The way that I've integrated hip-hop education into my counseling practice is I would create songs that spoke to different aspects of what they should learn in order to engage and empower students.
Ever ponder that question? Take time for reflection. The name
Students need to feel safe. As a counselor, we have to see things from their perspective. They have to feel that there's nothing that they can say or do where we'll turn our back on them. All right, you messed up on this line, but it's all good, keep going. You've come a long way from just listening to sharing. You've come a long way from just singing the hook to actually writing a verse. As long as the environment is safe and the student feels safe in the environment, that they can mess up without being judged, then the more they can experiment and be creative in that space, and that's where the creativity comes in. Immediately their self-esteem begins to rise. They gravitate towards their own voice and their unique voice. And the environment has to be empathetic, it has to be safe in order for this transformation to take place. But when it's practiced over and over again in a safe environment, their identity begins to become more confident.
I think that's wonderful because it may seem so simple, but just providing a safe space for students means so much. So thank you to that counselor and all of the wonderful counselors throughout the district. So next on the agenda, we have public testimony on items listed on the agenda.
President Craighead, there is a Hanukkah acknowledgement I would like to read.
I'm sorry?
A Hanukkah acknowledgement I would like to read. Before the public comment.
Did I? Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, Hanukkah is one of the most widely observed Jewish holidays. The celebration is an 8-day holiday that commemorates the victory of the Maccabees over the Greeks, also called the Festival of Lights. This holiday brings joy and warmth to communities and homes. Hanukkah starts on the 25th day of Kislev, the 9th month of the Hebrew calendar. Since this calendar follows a lunar cycle, this holiday begins on a different date each year. Modern celebrations focus on family and friends and include the lighting of a 9-branch calendar called the menorah, adding a calendar each night for 8 nights. Other traditions include eating foods prepared in oil such as latkes, sufganoi, as well as singing and playing special songs and games like dreidel. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I believe we're ready to go to public testimony on items listed on the agenda.
We do not have any speakers on items listed on the agenda.
Okay, in which case we will go to the next item, which is public testimony on items not listed on the agenda.
Yes, our first speaker. Oh, sorry. On items listed not on the agenda, we have 11 speakers.
Thank you.
And our first speaker.
Can I motion to have all of them? Just in the event we go over the 30 minutes, all of the speakers speak.
So you'd like to make a motion?
Yes,
that
to allow them all to
include all
speak.
11?
Yes, to include all 11 speakers.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on that?
Yeah, we may not need the time, but if necessary, yep.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Student Board Member Nawala?
Aye.
So that passes 5-0 with a preferential vote. So we will make sure all 11 speakers are heard. Thank you.
Our first speaker is Chris de la Garza, followed by Kat Tashea.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Chris De La Garza. I am the teacher librarian at McBride High School and Franklin Middle School. I was told last week that McBride High School will receive no library services next year. The library at a flagship college preparatory campus will be closed to students. The majority of libraries in the district will only be open 1 day a week, roughly 20% of the school year. Why does it matter that tens of thousands of students won't have access to a library for 80% of the school year? Literacy rates and reading scores are on the decline in this country. Many students are admittedly resistant to reading books, but school librarians pull out all the stops. Classes come to the library for book tastings, where instead of food, kids sample books until they find one they can devour. We host book clubs, plan reading incentive programs, and invite authors to speak on our campuses. I promise you that I have seen books change lives, and I'm fairly certain I have seen books save lives. California state law now requires schools to teach media literacy. Who better to do so than a teacher librarian? This is our bread and butter. This semester, I taught science classes at Franklin, lateral reading strategies to debunk health and wellness claims found on social media. In another lesson, students learned strategies for identifying AI-generated content and discussed the ramifications of changes to the information landscape. Librarians have the expertise to teach students how to locate and evaluate trustworthy information and how to cite sources. Students who just Google it or rely on generative AI are not college and career ready. Students need explicit and intentional instruction in order to discern information from misinformation and disinformation. I don't think that it's hyperbole to insist the future of our democracy depends on it. Finally, school libraries are community spaces. They are places where students feel a sense of belonging. They are places for everyone, but especially for the square pegs who don't fit in anywhere else. They are places for kids to go when they need a safe haven. Do we want these students to feel safe and seen just 20% of the school year? We need all student and community-facing positions, including teacher librarians, school nurses, social workers, and family resource coordinators. These positions ensure that students feel safe and supported. Please reconsider cuts to these vital services. Otherwise, we are just drafting a dystopian future for the district. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next we have Kat Tashea, followed by Marilyn Smith.
My name is Kat Tashea, and I have proudly served Long Beach for 26 years as a teacher librarian. I have always seen myself as a champion of resources for teachers, students, and the community I serve. Some of you have supported me professionally and personally, and I speak today with respect, integrity, and deep care of our district, especially our students. I recognize the reality of the declining enrollment, but when we compare the decline to the growth in director, program director, assistant director, program specialist, program administrator positions, the imbalance is clear. These positions have expanded in number, even as enrollments have dropped by more than 11,000 students. Former Superintendent Chris Steinhauser reminded us, cuts should be made first in positions furthest from our students, not closest to them, yet the current proposal does the opposite. We're in a mental health crisis. Students need their social workers, counselors, wellness centers, librarians, and frontline academic supports fully functioning. Families need more support than management. It contradicts our commitments to equity, transparency, and fiscal responsibility. The proposed district cuts will go from having 37 teacher librarians to 18 next year, a 52% cut. Library media assistants go from 20 positions to 3, an 85% cut. We were told central office would only be cutting up to 20%. Cutting the educators who directly serve students, teacher librarians, media assistants, and many other of my colleagues will deeply harm instruction, literacy, and the well-being of students. But it's not about individuals. It's about the positions that have the least direct student impact receiving the smallest share of reductions. That's not equitable or fiscally responsible. I respectfully ask the board to please review the growth of upper and middle management over the past 4 years and compare it to the declining enrollment and school closures. Include upper and middle management positions in staffing reductions, as they are the roles that are farthest from the daily academic and social emotional support of our kids. Consider the percentage of cuts directed at the roles that serve students every single day. If the district proceeds with the proposed cuts, it will be eliminating essential students. And it is not the Long Beach Unified District that I have been proud to work for 26 years.
Thank you.
Next, we have Marilyn Smith.
Okay, I wrote this very last minute. It could have been a lot better, but anyway. Good evening, board members. My name is Marilyn Smith. I have been a library assistant for 13 years, and I love my job. So do the other 19 library assistants. Students look forward to library visits with us each week. Library assistants bring a love for reading to students through books and activities. These experiences foster a curiosity and love for lifelong reading. As of now, 17 of the 20 library assistants are going to be let go. As a result, our students may only visit library once a month. Although our importance can't be measured by data, letting us go would be a huge loss. We're asking you to please reconsider. I see the difference in these kids every day. So many need this. So many kids need this. They don't have functional families, and this is something for them where they get some love. So please allow library assistants and teacher librarians to keep their jobs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Hannah Deck, followed by Daniel Boyce.
Hello, I am Hannah Deck. I am a library media assistant who currently works at 4 elementary school libraries. We were told that LBUSD is in a financial crisis right now. We found out last week that many of us certified and classified staff who educate, feed, care for, and clean up after our students, thousands of students, will be laid off. And we were told the bottom line during this process of reductions is to prioritize student success. I would like to share where over $3.5 million went in 2024. Jill Baker, Superintendent, $468,000. This is before benefits. Nader Twall, Program Administrator, $264,000. Christopher Lund, Assistant Superintendent, $256,000. Kelly Ahn, Assistant Superintendent, $238,000. Tiffany Brown, Deputy Superintendent of Schools, $297,000. Jay Camarino, Assistant Superintendent of High Schools, $250,000. Demita Myers, Director, $228,000. Rachel Heenan, Director, $237,000. Brian Moskovitz, Chief Academic Officer, $263,000. Yumi Takahashi, Chief Business and Financial Officer, $288,000. Susan Ginder, Financial Services Officer, $253,000. Jerome Kellenick, Chief Technology Supervisor, $255,000. Megan Kinsey, Senior Assistant General Counsel, $245,000. The total before benefits in just the year 2024 was $3,542,000. If any of these people did not show up to work, schools would function as usual. Students likely wouldn't even tell the difference. If I or any one of my colleagues or coworkers didn't show up to work, anywhere from 20 to 200 students would notice and miss us from one missed day. We were told last week that the top priority of the district is student success. So as we say to the kids, make a better choice. Do not go through with these layoffs. Make a better choice.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Daniel Boyce, and I'm a former Long Beach Poly student athlete today to speak about my personal experience during a major transition in Poly athletics program. When Coach Don retired and new leadership took over, many long-standing qualified coaches who had built Poly's reputation left the program. Their departure had immediate consequences. Several top athletes transferred to other schools to follow the coaches who had trained them for years. Those decisions reshaped the program, and student athletes like me felt the impact directly. During this period, I also experienced inconsistent treatment, favoritism, and situations that made me feel uncomfortable as a student athlete. My family was homeless at the time, and although adults in the program were aware of my situation, I often felt overlooked or misunderstood rather than supported. These experiences affected both my well-being and my athletic opportunities. I want to be clear that I'm not here to accuse anyone of wrongdoing. I'm here to speak about the impact of leadership decisions, lack of oversight, and inconsistent standards, issues that created an environment that harmed students, including myself. These concerns feel especially relevant today given the recently reported compliance issues with Poly's football program that led to internal investigation and team withdrawing from the playoffs. My experiences from years earlier reflected similar issues, unclear decision-making, lack of transparency, and policies that were not consistently enforced that suggest broader systematic problems within the athletic department, not isolated incidents. Also, I want the board to understand why I'm speaking today. The public petition asking the district to retain staff member Stefan Patterson is the specific reason why I came forward. My experience in the program were shaped directly by my interactions with him, and that is why I felt it was important to share my perspective. The petition does not explain why it exists or what concerns it responds to, yet it asks the community to take a position about transparency. I believe the board deserves to hear from someone who was present during the years when decisions involving this individual significantly affected athletes, team culture, and student well-being. I am not here to accuse anyone. I'm here to ensure the board is fully informed before making decisions that impact students. Today, I am respectfully asking the board to ensure that all athletic staff meet clear professional standards, student concerns are taken seriously, leadership decisions are transparent, and no student feels unsupported or unsafe due to failures of oversight. I share my experience so future student athletes do not go through what I did, and so Poly's program can return to the stability and excellence they once knew were for. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Tamika Boyce, followed by Tori Watts.
Good evening, President, Superintendent, and members of the board. My name is Tamika Boyce, and I stand before you tonight as a single mother who was once homeless in the city of Long Beach driving school buses for special needs students while my children and I were living in a shelter. Today, I am the chairperson of the Long Beach Continuum of Care on Homelessness, an emergency shelter provider for families, and a sworn Long Beach City Commissioner. But before any of those titles, I was just a mom trying to keep my son safe and give him hope. My son, Daniel Boyce, found that hope on the track at Long Beach Poly. As a freshman, he had a record-breaking season. He was a student athlete this district could be proud of. Excelling not only in academics but in sports, and his focus in the classroom was unparalleled. In pursuing doing this all while we were homelessness. While we were living in the shelter with limited resources, I trusted a program and especially a particular individual that was a mentor and a coach to my son. Over time, however, I watched a different story unfold. From my son's perspective, his experience, and what I observed as a parent, this individual created a culture of favoritism and immature and inappropriate dynamics between student athletes on and off the field. Where my son finally decided he no longer wanted to be a part of this behavior, when he decided to take a step back and set boundaries, he began to experience a lot of favoritism and felt alienated and pushed out. I want to be clear here. I'm not here to label anyone as a bad person or accuse anyone of a crime. I'm here to talk about the impact of leadership changes, lack of oversight, and inconsistent standards allowed a culture to grow where where adults are not held accountable and have major influence. When I see a public petition asking the district to retain a certain individual without explaining why there are concerns that exist in the first place, it hurts. My family's experience is part of the missing context. I trusted this person with my child at one of the most vulnerable times in our lives, and I share my son's experience to bring heightened awareness. As a mother and as a homeless services provider, and as someone who is entrusted with helping this city care for the most vulnerable, I am asking you to hold all athletic staff to a professional standard. Make sure that students who are experiencing homelessness and crises are intentionally supported and not overlooked. Ensure that the staff and the leadership. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Tori Watts and then Keisha Woods.
Good evening. My name is Tori Watts, and I'm the mother of an 8-year-old special education student in Long Beach Unified. I'm here tonight because what occurred at my daughter's triennial IEP on November 18th was not only unprofessional, it was part of a long, troubling pattern of safety failures and administrative negligence that have directly harmed my child. Last year, my daughter was viciously attacked and scratched in the face on 3 separate occasions by the same special ed student. She also ran out into traffic under school supervision. These are serious safety failures. On November 18th, I expected a triennial IEP to be handled with care. Instead, at 4 p.m., with OT, behavior, and the teacher's report still incomplete, I was suddenly told the meeting had to end at 4:30 p.m. This time was never disclosed. 30 minutes was not enough time. District Administrator Lauren Bowman responded to my concerns with a hostile, dismissive tone and stated that she could not guarantee future IEPs would be held during school hours. Her demeanor made the environment unwelcoming. Principal Christopher Thompson remained disengaged, slouched over on his phone, and when I identified what I perceived as sarcasm from the teacher, he abruptly told me to stop. Just stop, Miss Watts, in an authoritative tone. No parent should be addressed that way at an IEP meeting. Later, I raised a serious safety concern regarding scissors and toothpicks and other items sent home in my daughter's backpack without any notification. For a child who has already experienced physical harm at this school, I was met with defensiveness instead of accountability. By 4:15 p.m., the environment was way too hostile and rushed for me to participate meaningfully, and I ended the meeting myself. A triennial IEP should never be handled this way. For this reason, I'm glad that I recorded the entire meeting. At the CAC meeting on December 3rd, I spoke with risk management. Instead of accountability, I was offered a school change, a solution that protects staff, not students. On December 5th and 9th, I received emails directing me toward ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution, a private process that avoids public oversight and formal accountability. ADR cannot correct systemic issues or protect my daughter's rights. Tonight, I ask for real accountability. I request for my daughter's triennial IEP to be reconvened during school hours with adequate time for every provider. And I request that Principal Christopher Thompson and District Administrator Lauren Bowman be removed from all future IEP meetings involving my daughter. Their conduct created a hostile environment and interfered with the integrity of the IEP process. I need 15 seconds. I am here tonight, not just as a parent, but as my daughter's advocate. I expect
We will need to
corrective
continue.
action. I expect oversight. I expect this board to act. I will be watching. My name is Tori Watts.
Thank you. I do believe we had staff taking notes, and there will be follow-up.
We have Keisha Woods, followed by Mark Barone.
Good evening. My name is Keisha Woods, teacher at James Madison Elementary School, 30 years. I'm here again this evening, the same reason I came before. We, as moderate severe classroom teachers, we have lost one of our classroom aides. Working in a classroom with moderate severe students is challenging every day. It's a wonderful thing to work with our students, but we are required to do so many things every day. With one aide, it's impossible. Tomorrow, we have QCI training. Guess what? We're not going. Yes, someone said, well, then you're saving the district money. I said, we're not going. So our school will not be attending because my aide is exhausted. She spent 45 minutes this morning changing 11 kids. She's exhausted. And I had a parent who came in this morning and she said, well, Ms. Woods, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do that? And I said, I would love to. I said, can you hang around for a few minutes while I take care of some things? Because I wanted her to see what was happening. She sat there and her mouth was open. Dad came in and said, Mom, we've got to go. Mom said, have a seat. He sat down and he watched. And he saw exactly what was going on. I was trying my best to keep my students focused and working. My poor aide was running, trying to change all the students. I do have one-on-one aides, yes, but the students I have one-on-one aides, 2 of them have 2 aides, and there's a reason they have 2 aides. Believe me, there's a reason. But my parents have been volunteering all the time. I was out for a day last week, and we had some administrators come, and I am so appreciative that you came in. But let me tell you right now, it's a safety concern. It's a huge safety concern. We're not going to QCI tomorrow because the district is asking us to do a functional curriculum. We can't even teach the curriculum. We can't keep our kids working because we don't have enough staff. If we don't get more than 1 aide in the classroom, that mom just said, it's a safety concern. And I wish my school board member would come and see for herself, because I'll be honest, I've asked people, do they know who my school board member is in our area, and they don't know. I need for her to come to our school, see, so when you're making decisions, you know what you're making a decision about. 1 aide for moderate severe students, it's not gonna work. We're not teaching. All we're doing all day is playing safety. And it's not fair to our students. Our students can learn so much. They're so capable. They're wonderful kids, but they cannot learn. I'm teaching kids with black and white paperwork because we can't afford the ink. We bought beautiful printers, the district, for us, but the laser ink is $300, so I've used the laser printer for 1 month and that's it. So, you know, it's challenging. So again, please reconsider the 1 aide for each classroom, because right now it's not working, and I'm not teaching, and my parents are seeing it, and my parents are going to start really coming forward, and I appreciate that. And I hope, parents, you will say something, because it's not working. I'm just not teaching.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mark Barone, followed by Dallas Emerly.
It's okay, it's okay. Mark, you're gonna love Mark too, he's great. Hi everybody, my name is Dallas Emerly. I'm the Labor Relations Representative for CSEA Chapter 2. I'm here to tell you not to lay anybody off this year, no teachers, no classified staff. And to illustrate that point, I want to talk to you about a case that was recently concluded regarding a health assistant over at Avalon on Catalina Island. Her name is Ruby Engel. And just a couple years ago, in 2023, the district cut her hours, took away her benefits, did so illegally. CSEA filed a charge. We won, the district appealed. We won again. This board voted 5-0 to appeal again, and this time we won this case again. And this time it has not been appealed. Why am I talking to you about it now? Well, there's 3 things that I want you to take away from it. The first is the human cost of this case. We were told by the district, by your chief counsel, that the reason that this was pursued was so that the district could test the language, could see what it was able to do with this language, right? And what happened because of that? Well, one day before this decision came back, Ruby Engel quit her job because she couldn't afford to keep working here without benefits. And now students at Avalon do not have a health professional. If they get hurt, they get sick, there's nobody there to support them. And good luck filling that position even at 6 hours. That is not going to be an easy one to fill. That is the cost of doing so. You multiply that cost by quite a bit more with the layoffs that could be pursued. That is what is going to be experienced by students, by staff, by the community in this district. The second reason I want to bring it up is because of the massive waste that it was. We've asked the district to know what the actual cost of this case was, and we'll be finding out very soon, and we'd love to make sure that you have those figures too. But I can speak on a larger scale to the cost in the budget, and this is after the first interim came out. It was even higher before, but the cost in the budget for these consulting services, these professional services, this is what your legal costs fall under. We have 2 lawyers at our bargaining table every time we go to bargain. So my understanding the teachers have the same thing. We don't have any lawyers at the table. We're not quite sure why this is. Most districts, this isn't how it works. $179 million is what's being spent on professional consulting services. The deficit at this point is, 80-something million? That deficit could be wiped out, and it could be wiped out from cutting somewhere besides the lowest paid employees in this district. We're hoping that's where you look, because what are you getting for these services? Well, I don't know if you, the board, know this, but there's a reason why you didn't have a chance to vote to appeal this decision again. And it's because the district blew the timeline. It's because the district waited too long, didn't ask for an extension, and so you never had the chance to appeal this. I don't know if you were told that. I'm not sure. We haven't been informed whether that was the case, but ultimately that's what happened. We are asking that the district come to the table with us, discuss these issues, come to a plan together. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mark Barone, followed by Elizabeth Segura.
Good evening. My name is Mark Barone, and I teach 4th and 5th grade at Oropeza Elementary. I'm going to be reading an email to you that I was forced to send after being notified that I was expected to reassign one of my instructional aides as a one-on-one aide for a new student in my classroom. The email from OSSS reminded me that there's only one instructional aide allocated for all 4 and 5 MS classrooms, and ended with, "Please reach out if you have any further questions." Here's my response. No further questions, however, I do have comments. I understand that the OSSS IA staffing assignments are what we have to go by, but again, I'm going to document my concerns so that it cannot be said that I didn't try. I currently have a class of 15 students, several of which have one-on-one aides. However, many of my other students have extreme behaviors like hitting, spitting, elopement that have been unaddressed for several years, resulting in students who exhibit aggressive and often dangerous behaviors, for which there is already not enough staff to support. Now, taking another one of my already overworked IAs and assigning them to a student as a one-on-one aide is definitely going to result in a safety concern. Additionally, this will all but eliminate my ability to run effective small groups and deliver impactful and rigorous whole group instruction. In the 11 years that I've been teaching, I've had 3 students elope from campus. All 3 of those have happened in the last 6 weeks. Now, with another aide soon to be down, I'm incredibly concerned that this trend will continue. I'm very concerned that the decision to reduce MS classroom support staff may result in one or more of my or another school's students to be injured or worse. My school is located on 7th and Long Beach Boulevard, so the fear is very real, even with a fully loaded classroom full of aides. LBUSD talks about providing equity on our website and in nearly every meeting, PD, and document produced. But placing one IA in each MS 4th and 5th grade classroom without considering the actual need is not equity, because you are not giving each classroom and student what they need to be successful, and most of all, safe. In this case, Long Beach is not walking the talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Elizabeth Segura.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Segura. I am a junior at Jordan High School and an intern with Californians for Justice. I am here today to speak about the concerns of many teachers, nurses, librarians, counselors, and union members who are at risk of being laid off. I have spoken about this issue with many teachers from my school who all shared similar feelings: the fear of not having a job, the fear of not being able to provide for their families. My first-year English teacher, Dr. Lufer, who not only expressed to me the fears of whether or not she'll have a position next year, but also not knowing if she'll be able to finish this year. I can't imagine coming into class one day and not seeing her. She's made a huge impact not only on me, but also those around me. Let's take a look at the Board of Education goals. Goal 1, reading proficiency. Goal 2, reading acceleration. Goal 3, algebra proficiency. Goal 4, college and career readiness. How must we students be able to accomplish these goals, knowing that we won't have the resources to do so? So I ask, what is the Board of Education doing to guarantee that students won't lose these resources? Why should we students have to suffer the consequences of you guys not knowing nor being able to manage a budget accordingly? Consequences such as losing our favorite teachers, not having access to a library, and our class size potentially doubling. All we ask is you listen to the teacher's request and tap into the reserves. We, Californians for Justice, stand in solidarity with all the teachers, counselors, nurses, librarians, custodians, and union members who not only care for us, but care for our campus as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our speakers for tonight.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have item number 13, reports on superintendent advisory groups. We'll start with the Business Budget and Policy Development Group. Dr. Benitez.
Just one item for me, President Craighead. So state policy now mandates that our district develop a policy for referral protocols for youth mental health services. So in January, we will be receiving a draft for our consideration, and then ultimately for us to take action on it.
Thank you. And next we have the instruction and student learning supports. Member Lopez.
Yes, very briefly. We spent time discussing the plan for English learners, which is included in the Multilingual Learner Master Plan. And we also discussed the title of the plan, why it was selected, and why the title should be changed. And we'll be discussing it later on tonight again.
Thank you. And next we have Workforce Development, Member Miller.
Yes, so I have 3 points just to give you all an update on. First is the Equity, Leadership, and Talent Development. We are now accepting applications for the third cohort for the Preliminary Administrative Services Credential Program. We started that, I think that was 2 years ago now? Is it? Yeah, so it's been about 2 years. With that said, our goal is to select 20 highly talented, equity-centered leaders to join the next cohort. The application is currently available on the district website under E for Equity, Leadership, and Talent Development. Next is the Employee Relations and Ethics. So the district and TALB have held a negotiation session on Monday, December 8th, just a few days ago, in an effort to reach an agreement on a successor collective bargaining agreement. During the day's session, time was spent sharing information, providing feedback regarding mitigation of cost of healthcare premiums and the first interim budget update. During the session, the bargaining team reached an additional tentative agreement regarding maintaining co-pays for HMO office visits and chiropractic care. The bargaining team will reconvene on December 11th and remain committed to working together to resolve the outstanding matters in a way that reflects the shared priorities and supports of our educators and students. And last but not least, in regards to our human resource services, the Vision 2035 Strategy 7.1 and 7.2 teams continue to move forward with their goals by determining ways to create equitable transformation and strengthening community engagement. Both strategy groups will be conducting empathy interviews with selected students and or employees during December and January. As a reminder, the goal of Strategy 7.1 is to support our current students, especially Black and multilingual students, in becoming our future employees by understanding and creating the conditions that produce a sense of belonging. The Strategy 7.2's goal is to increase employee retention by creating culturally affirming work environments to encourage certificated staff of color to stay and thrive in our school district. That is my workforce development update.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the consent calendar. We need a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just have a quick question. The contract with West Group Designs to provide architectural services to Henry Elementary School. the contract to be increased by $59,665 from $1,558,303.99 to a maximum of $1,617,968.99. And I guess that I'm asking about this particular contract because this is a school that we're looking to move our students to another facility. It says, oh no, sorry, this is Henry. No, so if you could just elaborate on this contract. I was confusing it with Keller, but no, on this particular contract, yes.
Services addressing the interim housing that we're doing at Monroe in anticipation of Henry coming over. So like for instance, we have to do some kitchen work and get some health department approval to ensure that cafeteria is going to be ready when the kids are there for interim housing.
Any further discussion on the consent calendar? In which case, I'll have our board secretary take a roll call vote.
Member Lopez?
Aye.
Vice President Otto?
Aye.
President Craighead?
Aye.
Member Benitez?
Aye.
Member Miller?
Aye.
And Student Member Nuala?
Aye.
That passes 5-0 with a preferential vote.
Thank you. And now we will go to item 15, consent calendar B.
Move for approval.
Second.
Discussion? I will ask our board secretary to take a roll call vote.
Member Lopez?
Aye.
Vice President Otto?
Aye.
President Craighead?
I will abstain.
President Benitez?
Not president, but board member. Aye.
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 That's 5-0. I'm sorry, 4-0 with one preferential vote. And one abstention.
I believe, too. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And next on the agenda, under new business, we have acceptance of monitoring reports for board interim goals 1B and 2B.
Thank you, and I'm happy to kick off the item tonight for the two monitoring reports that are before you. So for public who are following online, these materials start on page 196 of the board materials and can be accessed in that form. So I'm going to start and then be joined by Dr. Myers-Miller, Mr. Zaid, and Mr. Moskovitz as we delve into fluency. And I'd like to start just returning to all of the ways that we're thinking about assessing reading. So the interim goals that are before you both have to do with fluency. In the last board meeting, you heard an update on foundational reading skills. And so 1A, interim goal 1A is around foundational reading skills, which we reviewed in the last meeting. 1B, by June 2028, 80% of students in grade 3 will meet or exceed on the spring fluency assessment. 1C, by June 2028, 75% of students in grades 1 through 3 will be on or above grade level on iReady Reading Diagnostic 3 assessment. Reminder about fluency as it relates to the overarching goal. So the overarching goal, board goal 1, is the percentage of grade 3 students who meet or exceed grade level standards on the state English Language Arts SBAC exam will grow from 48% in 2023 to 70% by June 2028. The reason I'm repeating the components of this is that, as you know, our interim goals are intended to be predictive of success on the large goal itself, so on goal 1. In our review of foundational reading skills, the other important component is fluency. So fluency is students using the routines, applying what they've learned in the foundational reading skills to bring reading to life. It's an opportunity for students to think about how decoding becomes automatic so that a teacher can focus on comprehension. So 3 really important interim measures to get to the goal. So I'm going to review the 4 components of our report, which now are in a standard form since July. So if you look at page 198, I'm going to draw attention to, again, resetting the baseline data because of our assessment system and wanting to recognize that we're moving from prior reports that had 76 days of instruction. This report has 43 days of instruction. And so when we share about professional learning and intervention and routines, we're also setting a new baseline for success. As you turn to the components, so you'll see, just to say it out loud, the goal at the top, interim goal 1B, and the board goal itself, which is part of the monitoring report. The data represented in two forms on page 198. And then I'm just going to, at a high level, just speak into additional interpretation, the evidence, and the plan. And then based on, we got a couple of questions that didn't come in before we could use them to post, but we'll include the questions that board members did send along to us in addressing teacher professional learning and look-fors, intervention, and routines. So at a high level, you can see the analysis that's there, calling attention specifically to a lot of good entry implementation and observation of uneven implementation. So in the journey to reteach and to provide teachers with the toolkit that they need to be successful in their classroom, it is also normal in the early time of implementation to see uneven progress. What it calls upon us to do, and you see in next steps, is to think about coaching, assignment of coaching and modeling and supports for teachers so that we lessen the implementation differences across classrooms at a single school and across schools. What's working, you can see just strength in our team's analysis of looking at the decoding routines, which Mr. Zaid will talk more at length about, developing fluency specifically. Fluency is not new, but the reestablishment of these routines across classrooms has been a focal area. And then in terms of what needs more attention, you can see the call out of acceleration of fluency practice to counter the shortened assessment window, strengthening Tier 1 instruction, which is the instruction provided by a classroom teacher through those routines and modeling. And the opportunity that we have because of the from boardroom to classroom data reporting to learn from each other, for schools to learn from one another, for teachers to learn from one another. And so some of what's reflected and what needs more attention is because of the learning that's taking place. And then in next steps, and I'll call out the 4 things that are there. Instruction and intervention coordinators and literacy leads using the Q1 fluency data to think about how do you launch targeted coaching cycles and support, our district coaches providing in-the-moment coaching and modeling to strengthen our teachers feeling confident in those routines, to use upcoming learning walks where, again, we're learning from one another, walking classrooms, reviewing data together, and then refining Tier 1 fluency instruction through the routines that we will speak into. Because of the similarity of these reports, I'm going to turn, before I turn it over to my colleagues, turn to the second report, which is Interim Goal 2B, found on board packet page 206, which again lays out the goals. So the interim goal at the top, this specifically names 4th and 5th grade students who were not met achievement level on prior year SBAC, and then thinking about their attainment of increased in the fluency assessment. Again, the difference in instructional days is highlighted, so while you see lower data, also with approximately 30 fewer instructional days. Some analysis just calling attention to what we're seeing, and then, again, interpretation and evidence of plan. I'm not going to run through these specifically because there's so much overlap between the 2 reports, but to get into some of the details we're going to address, Dr. Myers-Miller is going to speak into a question that was asked about teacher PD and then the specificity of look-fors, and then Mr. Zaid will speak briefly about interventions and some of the ways that we're supporting teachers in the routines that they're using to establish high-quality fluency practices in their classrooms. So I will turn it over to Dr. Myers-Miller.
Good evening again. I would like to uplift some of the professional training that has taken place with our teachers. In the summer of 2025, we supported all of our 3 through 5 teachers in getting reading right training. In that particular training, it was a clear support of developing some literacy routines and practices around what it means to teach reading and being explicit, systematic around the skills of phonological awareness, of phonics, and specifically to this particular goal, looking at fluency as the bridge toward enhancing students' decoding to comprehension. All of the teachers in grades 3 through 5, as I said, were trained. We have supported not only training, but we have supported our administrators in being able to monitor the implementation of the training. And one of the ways that we have done that, we have engaged in job-embedded coaching and walking alongside with our department curriculum coaches to uplift effective practice in application. And so when we are doing that, we are using our content look for tool that uplifts those literacy routines, and we help our administrators know what effective looks like and sounds like, so that they are able to use that as a reference and as a support when they're working back with their classroom teachers. Additionally, we support our classroom teachers as indicated here in what's working in next steps with our intervention coordinators and our literacy leads. We use them as an additional support coach, working and modeling in classrooms within those specific expectations of literacy routines and practices. So those are some of the ways in which over the course of the last several months that we've really been focusing in on enhancing our older learners who are still grasping towards meeting that reading and literacy proficiency through very explicit routines, and looking specifically at the fluency routine as a bridge, and supporting that with implementation aspects with our coaches and our administrators.
So I'll just speak a little bit further and build upon that thought by just saying one of the things that I appreciate about our collaboration with our Office of Curriculum and Instruction, OCIPD, is the coaching cycles that are happening in partnership. And so those coaching cycles include modeling those fluency routines. It includes side-by-side coaching with teachers, and then observing teachers as they implement those fluency routines. One of the other, I'll just say, particularly proud moments, because I spent some time looking at our first 1B and 2B report from July 16th, checking off all the things we said we were going to do, and then looking at, of course, the new list of things that we're moving forward with. But one of the things that we're really proud of is the specificity that has been developed with a 5-day daily routine that is happening in our classrooms, as well as a fluency routine note-taking tool for teachers. So just to share what that specificity looks like, it looks like on Monday, really not only explicitly having a fluency lesson, whether they're focusing on expression or whether they are focusing on pacing, or whether they're focusing on accuracy, but making sure that on day one, there's an opportunity for a routine or a practice like echo reading. And then on day 2, having choral reading. On day 3, having partner reading. On day 4, having the students independently read. And then on day 5, there are students who will look at their words per minute to look at how that is growing and how that is progressing. So those are some of the ways in which fluency routines are happening daily in our classrooms. And one of the things that we have are those support tools and those look for tools. Also just want to speak for a moment to some of the interventions, because the question sometimes comes up, here is what the general expectation is, and here's where we expect students to be, but what happens when students are not quite there? And one of the things that I just want to, again, to reiterate is our intervention and instructional coordinators have a dual role in one, providing interventions when that is needed, and also supporting the capacity building of teachers. And so in those dual roles, one of the primary ways that we are supporting is in small group instruction. One of the things that I'll just say is nice is we use a diagnostic tool. And the diagnostic tool begins to share specifically where we are going to focus. For example, if a student is struggling with reading comprehension, that diagnostic tool tells us, okay, let's go back and assess for oral and reading fluency. If a student is struggling with oral or reading fluency below 50%, then that diagnostic tool tells us, all right, let's assess those phonics skills. And a lot of times when we're talking about small group instruction, we're talking about small group instruction in some of those phonics skills connected to text. So students having an opportunity to work on those phonics skills and then directly translated into text, which is some of what we talked about the last time. And then there's also those additional opportunities to continue to develop and practice fluency. So interventions are happening primarily through small groups, but we also do have some after-school opportunities for additional practice that are happening. We are compiling interventions in terms of how they look at each one of our schools, which schools are offering after school, and which schools are doing small group instruction. We do have both actually happening. But most importantly, we're assessing students, looking at our Q1 data, being data driven, and then making sure that we're providing additional opportunities for those students who are not quite there and need that support.
I was just saying, I think if we open it up to some board questions, then we can take it from there.
Thank you. So, and I apologize for not having submitted this question previously.
Yeah.
But quite frankly, I just thought of it right now as you were covering the monitoring report. So my question is for both interim goal 1B and 2B under both sections, what needs more attention? And I'm trying to think through I think I understand the why. I'm trying to think through, okay, what does it mean? For us to have a lower baseline because of the assessment taking place with less days of instruction. And then what both Dr. Myers-Miller and Mr. Zaid just shared. So is there any difference in how we approach addressing early in the year gaps, knowing that some of that may be related to where those students were in the prior year? So again, interim board goal 2B, we're looking at 4th grade through 8th, right? Interim goal 1B, we're looking at 3rd grade. So can you talk more about how do we address, given that we're doing the assessment earlier in the year, that we have early year gaps here? Did I make sense with that question? What would you say, Brian? Strategic question there?
I think it was strategic.
Okay.
What I heard you ask, let me make sure I understood the question. What I heard you ask is, so we have data earlier in the year at the Q1 date rather than later into December. And what does that allow us to do to maybe to intervene or accelerate earlier in the year with that data?
And maybe there's a part B. What does that say, if at all, anything, about where students were in that last assessment for the previous year, in that transition? All right, particularly from 3rd, interim goal 1B, to 4th, when we do that early assessment in 4th grade as well.
I'll start with that and then, of course, invite colleagues back. I think part of what's nice about looking at both 1B and 2B in conjunction, 1B is really about Tier 1 quality instruction to ensure that our students in grade 3 are reading proficiently, and that is mostly about Tier 1 quality instruction. So the fluency routines that our teachers are establishing are ensuring that all of our students are reading with automaticity, with accuracy, with expression. 2B, of course, then is looking specifically at our students in the upper grades. In this case, it's only 4th and 5th because we don't do the fluency routines in middle school like we do in elementary. But how do we then intervene and accelerate differently than maybe we would as a Tier 1 model? So I think you heard both expressed. and part of what you bring up is something we've been talking about, is in 4th and 5th grade, for students who are struggling readers, what does need to be done differently, specifically as it relates to some of the foundational skills? Because traditionally, people think of foundational skills as what we do in K2. And the reality is there are foundational skills standards all the way through 5th grade. And for students who are struggling readers in 4th and 5th, it's often a fluency challenge that they're experiencing. So part of what is a not necessarily new, but a building on in the training this year is how do you help 3rd through 5th grade teachers, 4th and 5th grade teachers, whose expertise may not be the early literacy skills, how do you help them to understand some of those routines that need to happen? And then I think as we talked about last time, one of the benefits of the earlier assessment is, and you heard reference to what we did as it relates to the work with Dr. Madrigal and her research team, is providing a very, what am I trying to say, like specific information about individual students' progress earlier in the year. Oftentimes we wouldn't really have that data for our principals and for our teachers to compare with one another until December or January by the time the data came in. Here we were able to provide that by the end of October, early November, and our schools have already this month, and probably as we speak, tomorrow's a faculty meeting, many of our schools are engaged in data talks, data chats, ways that they're going to do things differently in November and December, and providing some of those action steps early on. So those would be some of my immediate responses, and Mr. Zaid, I don't know, what might you add to that?
Yeah, I'll build on that and just share, hopefully this gets, I'm in the ballpark of your question, I'll say that. But similar to what we shared when we were going over foundational skills, when we are looking at our student data, which both has fluency as well as has their foundational skills, when we're looking at that side by side, it's telling us which students were exceeded, which students were met, which students were nearly met. Well, one of the things that we did, and I just shared this, is we looked at not just our students who were met this time, but students where if we were to do the same assessment next quarter, their score would show that they would not be met, the next time, meaning they met this cut point, but the next cut point, they're below that, right? So that allows us to proactively say, what do we need to do? And then as we were speaking about 3rd, 4th, and 5th, what are those things that we need to do to really accelerate, right? And what does it look like to make sure that we have those after-school opportunities? What does it look like to have that targeted small group instruction? And what does it look like to make sure that we are giving multiple opportunities to continue building those skills? So that's one of the ways that we proactively say, here is where you are now, but this is where you need to be. So let's make sure that we're benchmarking all the way and giving those additional opportunities.
So speaking to that, one of my curiosities is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, so you're saying that we would technically change that, I don't even know if I'm using the right term here, I'm going to make it up, pre-benchmark, and we're going to change it year over year, correct? So for example, yeah, the baseline. So year over year, therefore triggering the notification of students who potentially will need interventions.
Let me explain it. Let me see if I can explain it a little bit more.
Okay.
So let me give you an example, not necessarily with fluency, but I'll give you an example with high frequency words.
Okay.
Right. So let's say this first cut point in quarter one says we need to know at least 14 high frequency words. Mm-hmm. But a student knows 27,
mm-hmm.
right? So you met this time.
Correct.
Right? But the next cut point is no longer 14.
Right.
Deeper into the year, we now expect you to know, and I'm not giving the real number. I'm just
right. Yes, we've created a fake.
Right.
Yes. Scenario.
Hypothetically,
correct.
Just so no one's at home.
Oh
going,
yeah, hypothetical scenario.
Hypothetically,
right.
Hypothetically, the next one might be 30, but you were at 27. So I know that you met this cut point, mm-hmm. but I know that you are not going to meet the next one. right? If we were judging it right now. So how do I continue to proactively give you that additional practice versus we have some students who have exceeded, maybe they're at 56, right? So it's just how we are grouping students and providing those additional opportunities.
And my question was more centered around, so using that hypothetical scenario, if in 2025 we requested that they know 14, and we're still saying in 2026 we'll also require 14. So because we're trying to grow the amount of numbers, does that number also progress?
I think more than changing the cut points from year to year, we're changing the complexity of the text or changing the complexity of the language that they need to achieve. So, for example, we might, from a fluency standpoint, again, we're measuring accuracy, we're measuring speed or automaticity, and there's a certain number of words per minute with accuracy that we're looking for. And part of the reason, by the way, we do that is because the research shows that when students read with accuracy and with automaticity and at the right pace, they retain the text more likely to retain the text. And then when we get into the higher levels of comprehension, you read a long passage, you're more likely to retain that.
Right.
Whereas if students are reading word by word at a slow pace, then by the time they get to the end of that passage, they sometimes struggle to remember what they read, and then they struggle with the comprehension. So, but with that, it's not so much that the number of the speed would need to change from second grade to third grade. It's that the text that they're reading is longer, more complex. The words are more challenging to read. Compound words, longer words, putting more sounds and together. And so the complexity of the text increases more than the expectation of speed increases.
So to confirm, you're saying that the complexity of the text for a 2025 second grader is going to be a June 2025 second grader it's going to be more complex for a June 2026 second grader.
So second grade to second grade, this year's first graders
Correct.
Will finish the year at reading first grade text.
Correct.
The next year they will go to second grade. From the very beginning in September, now they're reading more complex text. But the next year's first graders are still reading the same text that the first graders read the prior year.
And I don't want to lose sight of what I'm trying to get to. So what I'm trying to figure out is that, for example, because one of the things that you brought up was what would be the trigger to a need for intervention, correct? And so my question is that essentially if the baseline that tells us if they will or will not need intervention continues to increase to a certain extent, then technically wouldn't interventions always kind of be almost like a standard of practice than more of a trigger? I guess that's the piece that I was trying to get to.
All right, Tag, you're it, Mr. Zaid.
All right, let me jump in. Let me see if I can make sure.
Oh, I'm coming right after whatever you say right now, Mr. Zaid.
Neither. All right, so let me try to make sure that I was explaining it. Originally, what I was talking about was cut points and words per minute. Like second grade, I know they have to read. We need to be at about 170, right? And so we were talking about, where are you in terms of meeting? Where are you in terms of exceeding? And so I think you were asking, is 170 going to are we going to keep moving the needle so that you always need interventions? No. And then what you were hearing is it naturally becomes more complex because I was in first grade this year, and then I move up to second grade next year. So there's a different level of
progression,
of
course.
A natural progression through the grade levels. So I was explaining more of cut points within a grade level. Right. But what we do is we look at who exceeded, who met, and then from the met, think of it this way. When you passed the test, you passed, right? Let's not think about A, B, or C. Just let's think elementary. You passed or you didn't, right? Did you pass by a high margin or was it a close margin? If it was a close margin, we know that we need to continue with that small group targeted instruction. Does that make sense? Because we're just being proactive to continue to provide you with that support. So hopefully
Here's a super simplified version as well for someone who's a parent of an elementary student.
I think you're probably catching my interest.
The assessments are driven by the standards that guide that grade level. And so there's correlation studies done in iReady to say, like, what should be what students should be reading based on the standards. So everything is within a grade level we're talking about, and then the next grade level is based on those grade level standards. We're not comparing or changing them.
Okay.
They're set by the standards at that grade level, and then the assessments that align to showing proficiency in those grade level standards.
Got it.
I think one thing I would add, and I appreciate the question because it's also helpful. We know that folks are watching this at home, watching on video. And it's helpful to explain as parents are watching. Something else that I think is always a good reminder is one of our overall goals generally, not specific to board goals, but overall goals generally, is that a student makes at least 1 year's growth.
Right.
So a first grade student comes in at a certain level in first grade, they make at least a year's growth. If they're further behind, they make more growth, more accelerated growth. Our fourth and fifth grade students who are not meeting standards on SBAC, we need to accelerate their growth. So if you think about, I'll just kind of align a trajectory from the beginning to end of the year of kind of 1 year's growth, along the way, we're measuring where are students right there at that point in time. And students who might be a little below that growth trajectory need to be accelerated. Students who are a little above that growth trajectory may need to be accelerated still, because if they stayed status quo, they wouldn't meet the next benchmark later in the year. So all of our students are on this journey of 1 year's growth, at least 1 year's growth. And these data points allow us to kind of see where are they in that moment in time, and what does each individual student need to continue, because all are accelerating, but some might need greater acceleration to get back on grade level, and some who may be well above, we don't want to slow them down, we want to continue that acceleration. So it's each individual student. That data helps us to figure out where are they in the journey of 1 year's growth. And as the benchmark increases throughout the year, the expectation, that's what helps us know if they're kind of on that trajectory.
Right.
So I don't know if that visual helps.
No, and I appreciate that. So you guys already kind of caught the undertones what my question was going to be, because I was just curious if over a year in 2025, are we going to have to provide more intervention to students in 2026 than we did in 2027, than we did in 2028, which requires additional resources. And we've already had a conversation about resources as is, and so it was probably going to spark a whole different conversation that needs to be a part of a different question, but all things considered, that's where my thought process was. So thank you for giving me at least a little bit of clarity. Thank you.
Running the hypothetical. This is all super helpful because we're running through these interim monitoring reports for the first time in some of these, right? So that helps me now articulate what I was trying to get at with my first question, which you answered. I just didn't ask the right question. So I'm interested in that transition. Let's say in this case, let's keep it to fourth, fifth, right? Fourth, fifth. Assuming that there is a correlation with where a student ends on the last assessment in fourth grade, and then the earlier assessment in fifth grade. Is there, and again, understanding that it's a different thing that we're assessing in the fifth grade, right? And for different purposes. That's where I'm trying to figure out, okay, are there enough days of instruction in the earlier assessment to then understand correlations with where a student may have been at or very close to meeting in that fourth grade. And then in the fifth grade, there may be something else. So that's where I'm like, okay, is there a different way that we address that early, whether it's an intervention or you're on track, given that if we're successful in fourth grade and where they ended up in fourth grade, where is there a correlation with how we're using last assessment in fourth grade to then if there is an early gap, fifth grade? Does that make sense now? I mean, again, all things through the lens of this hypothetical, Mr. Zaid.
So yes, so of course when teachers initially get their roster in September, we have data on the previous year. So they use the data from the previous year to support students. And then there are other things that I'll just say maybe I didn't mention in this setting, but we also not only have small group interventions, but we also have a program called Sunday when we have students who are, let's just say, a few grade levels below as it relates to reading. So there are a variety of ways that we are providing interventions, but as soon as a teacher has the data, we don't wait for quarter 1 data. We get started with that support immediately, if that's helpful.
That's it, and I didn't phrase it for those students that are 2 or more grade levels behind in the 4th grade.
Yeah.
Something is happening clearly, K2.
Yes.
That how do we then use that even before we do that first assessment, given that first assessment is early? Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Something else that's really, I think really interesting. Oh, I'm sorry. Something that's really interesting is that part of what Dr. Madrigal and her team are also looking at is the correlation between one assessment to another. And you've heard us talk multiple times about we've moved away from a single assessment determining a student's ability. So the other thing we're doing is we look, and we intentionally, as you recall, we intentionally chose these interim measures to say that these 3 interim measures, how do they collectively help us understand our progress towards the broader goal itself? And we're also looking at that with students. So SBAC is something that tells us a data point. Where is a student on this assessment? But at the end of a 4th grade year, 3rd grade year, they're also having a fluency assessment. And they're also taking iReady. And they're also, so there are these multiple assessments that then a teacher can look at and say, okay, where is this student falling out? Is it a fluency foundational skills problem? Is it a comprehension challenge that they're experiencing? Is it multiple things, right? And so then it's not about do they need more support in fluency? Maybe. There may be something else that they're actually needing that support in. And we know that early on because we have those multiple measures.
So my question is, if we're not addressing comprehension, how are we going to increase the SBAC test scores? Right. So I think that's critical in especially in 4th and 5th grade.
So just to clarify, we are addressing comprehension, specifically the way in which we're addressing comprehension with our content specific is called building knowledge and language. And so we are addressing those comprehension skills. We just happen to be talking tonight just on fluency, which is, the reading that I'm doing, my words per minute. But we are addressing comprehension as well.
Just another example of that. And we'll actually come back to you all, I believe, next week. I'm getting all these meetings, and next week, the interim measure that we'll be speaking about is 1C, which is 2C, which is related to our district ELA assessments, and those are primarily based on comprehension. So while we're talking today about fluency, next week when we come back to you, we'll really be able to engage in conversation about comprehension, because that is primarily what is assessed in the ELA district assessments that will be part of 2C.
So I have a question about the interventions themselves and who chooses the interventions. Is it kind of a top-down thing? Is it each school site having a choice from options? How does that work?
Could you repeat the last part of your question, Board Member Berghead?
Well, I'm wondering if the school sites choose from options that are provided, or is it more of a top-down, this is what we're going to do, like say for fluency. This is the intervention for fluency.
Before any intervention is engaged with students and groups of students, we always look at the data to determine what specific area and focus is in need. And specifically, if we're talking about fluency, we use the fluency monitoring tool as a bridge to how the students are performing related to that. And then our unit guides and our curricular resources provide specific intervention scaffolds and supports for students who are not meeting those needs. So all of our unit guides have specific intervention opportunities for differentiation of students who need additional support and scaffolds.
What about the language development for English learners?
In the unit guides themselves, there are scaffolds for our English learners and language supports available in those as well. So our unit guides are very comprehensive. We use a universal design method as it relates to the framework for designing units of study. And in those units of study, we look at what are the needs of all learners and provide the tier 1 and what would be the access that students who come and have varying needs would be able to, what would they need to be able to access and support to be able to get those same levels of learning experiences.
I just want to shift back for just a moment. If I understood the question correctly, I think I may have heard you ask kind of, is there a intervention that all schools use, similar to like, do you have a program? Is there like in ST math, if we were talking about math, that folks, right, kind of, that's the ST math, right? That folks just kind of all, does everybody use something top down? And while our, curriculum guides and those supports are very comprehensive, there isn't necessarily like just a one sort of top down approach. Everyone must use this particular program. Everyone uses our curriculum, but they use it to design specifically for students what they might be working on based on that data, right? So a student might be working on phonics and then moving to what's provided, that connected text. But there isn't necessarily like a vendor or a particular something just for fluency, if that's what I'm not, was that the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can add to that too. So schools have tutoring that they have funds to use for specific tutoring that's direct, that the school decides who teaches it, how they're intervening. Are they using their class? Is it the teacher with his or her own classroom and then using the resources? In addition, one of the benefits of Dr. Gonzalez's move from the curriculum office to the expanded learning opportunities office as director is the significant expansion of articulating interventions and thinking about the after-school experience that is housed in every school now and what that will look like to get further aligned to the core curriculum. We are appreciative of all that has gone on for expanded learning opportunities, and we also see this as an opportunity for us to grow systematically around interventions and to think about the partners that we have out in the field. How do we help them to use the intervention materials that are available to them? How do we even resource those so that students feel a lot of, they experience outside of their school day similarly to what they experience in the school day? And then also, Ms. Lopez, you asked about our ELD curriculum, and I think Dr. Myers-Miller mentioned this, but just to say that the adoption, the English language arts adoption, has an ELD curriculum aspect to it that is part of when Dr. Myers-Miller talked about the unit guides. It's accessible. The teacher resources and the connections to those are accessible through the unit guides. Do you want to add something, Brian?
Yeah, I was actually, I think I want to connect back for a moment. You talked about the after-school interventions that we're starting to build out under Dr. Gonzalez's support with the team that's there. This is connecting back to the conversation that started at 3 o'clock around some of our district budget. That's kind of an exciting thing just to let you all know about. The state this year is allowing attendance recovery, what's called attendance recovery, by providing specific supports, interventions to students after school by a credentialed teacher. With a certain number of hours of that support, we're actually going to also be able to recover attendance dollars if a student might have been absent. So we're going to be able, under this, and I'll say, you'll recall last year when we are actually receiving more ELOP funding this year than last year because the state changed the threshold back down that 55% that we talked about around unduplicated. So while we're overall experiencing a decline in district resources, ELOP is actually one resource that's going up. And so we're using that in a very intentional way to build out a stronger, more robust intervention model that will allow us to both intervene in things like reading and math and other areas, and will also support, in some way, we don't know yet the level, in some way they'll support some of the attendance recovery dollars as well.
And the same would apply. We used English learners as an example, but with students with disabilities, to have specific interventions for, again, pending the IEP, but for students with disabilities that are also not yet meeting.
Yeah, and actually part of the expectation by having that threshold at 55%, part of the expectation is our first obligation with ELOP is to provide services to unduplicated students. Some of that is obviously parent opt-in to have their child after school, but we want to make sure that students with IEPs, English learners, homeless foster, that they are prioritized in receiving not just the after-school care, but the interventions that we're talking about as well.
Okay. Oh, Member Otto.
Yeah, my concern, trying to look at it from completely outside, is there seem to be so many moving parts, meaning that we're trying to measure these different things. We're trying to do them in enough time so we have accurate data. We're getting fewer dollars to do these things. I'm thinking of me as somebody completely outside the district or in education, wanting to understand how it's going to work and why we feel that what we're doing makes us confident that we're not going to just have somebody get it done. I've used before the example of when you pay attention, things happen, but maybe we're getting less ability to pay attention because of dollars that are going away or inability to test enough that we want. And I just make me feel comfortable that we're taking these things into consideration. We're doing the best that we can with an idea that it's going to make a difference.
Do we have any further comments or questions regarding the monitoring report? In which case, I will just kind of remind us that we are on this journey of monitoring, and we're a little bit new. And part of our homework as board members is to submit questions prior to a deadline so that staff has an opportunity to research answers and bring them forward at a board meeting. And so I don't believe I captured or caught how many board members submitted questions prior to tonight's meeting.
Ooh, you're going to put us on blast, President Craig.
I do every time, so this time will not be any different.
Because it was 0. So there were no submissions on time.
On time.
There was one day late, 24 hours later, that we had already gotten to publication stage. So,
Okay.
And then I think we had 2 submissions this meeting for next week. We will include those questions with the public materials
Okay.
also. So we incorporated answers to the questions that were submitted, even if they're late. It helps us to be more comprehensive, to think about,
Right.
examples, et cetera. And when they're submitted on time, it gives us a few days to get the answers and publish them with the materials.
Okay. And Dr. Benitez, you may remember that as part of our self-evaluation tool, we take a look at our effectiveness for monitoring, and part of being effective is submitting questions ahead of time. And so that's why, even though it might be a little uncomfortable to hear that none of us submitted questions on time, and I'll just, I'll throw it out there, Thanksgiving, and it was a
Duly
break.
noted, President Craighead, duly noted.
But the silver lining, 3 board members submitted questions prior to tonight, so technically, it's got to count for something. Anyhow, and now we have back-to-back meetings that throws everybody into a tizzy over our change in routines. It's very hard for staff, I'll have to say, and I'm going to give everybody here credit, and everybody who's not here, to come back from a week off and then have back-to-back meetings and everything else you have to deal with. So we'll bear with you and you bear with us. Okay, so in that case, we do need a motion to accept the monitoring reports as long as we feel that they have, or the monitoring reports fulfill the requirements listed on page 196.
So acknowledging that I will do better, President Craig, to get my questions in on time or before, so that staff, all seriousness, can have time, and we can use our time here better.
Yeah.
I move to accept monitoring reports for interim goals 1B and 2B.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? And Student Board Member Nwala.
Aye.
So that passes 5-0 with one preferential vote from our Student Board Member. And that moves us along to the next item on the agenda, which is,
Would you like to take a break? A bio break? It's 6:45. Up to you all, but just calling attention to the time.
okay, can we have a 5-minute break? I'm looking around, 5-minute break? Okay, so it is, according to that clock, and it's the one I can see in front of me, so according to that clock, it is 6:45, so we'll be back at 6:50. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back, everybody. Our break is hereby over, so I'm going to invite everybody to return to their seats so we can rejoin the meeting. And that brings us to item number 6.2, Student Outcome Focused Governance Board Guardrails. So at our November 5th board meeting, we sent this item to committee, and the committee has met, and there are 3 recommendations that are being presented tonight. And so I will have our student board member read those recommendations being brought forward by the committee.
Thank you, President Craighead. So the committee first decided to condense the draft board guardrails 1 through 3 to the board will not direct operational responsibilities to anyone except the superintendent or engage in any action that impedes upon the day-to-day operations of administrative or otherwise of the district. And then condensing draft board guardrails 4 and 5 to the board will not try to influence or intimidate the student board member into making a response or taking position whether at a board meeting or any other time. And then 3, which condenses 7 through 8, will be the board may not make decisions, policies, or changes to policies that lack clear alignment with the district and board's established strategic goals, policies, values, or guardrails without input from the greater Long Beach community. Those are our 3 recommendations.
Thank you. So that comes, because it's a recommendation from a committee, that is the motion. So.
Move for approval?
Second.
Thank you. And discussion.
Yeah, I think that, board guardrails are important, but we had 15, and that included in decision-making, the board will not move forward without first ensuring that all members' perspectives, including dissenting opinions and any minority opinions, are heard. The board is committed to including all members' viewpoints and decision-making, including minority opinion. We also had other recommendations, because there were 15 boiled down to the 3. The board will not disregard community input, even when it reflects disagreement in the direction being taken. The board will not allow the president to serve longer than 1 quarter before rotating the role, to ensure all members have the opportunity to lead and be visibly recognized by the communities they represent. And board members will not interpret or explain another member's statement and will not engage in side conversations while someone is speaking. Each board member will have the opportunity to express their thoughts without interruption or reinterpretation. And while it is clear and understood that we can't have 15 board guardrails, I think that there's some that should have been considered, including the one that the board does not disregard community input, even if it's something that we as a board may not be aligned with or reflects disagreement with the direction we're taking. And I certainly believe that every voice on this board must be heard, even if it's not what we want to hear, because we all represent constituents. And so I know that I was part of that committee, and I also know that we were given a month to come up with the board guardrails. And I do know that following the meeting, I will take full responsibility. An email did circulate asking me to meet to discuss them along with board President Craighead and our student board member. And because we had a month, there was the expectation that we would have a month really to work on them. And this was right before the holidays or the Thanksgiving break. So in those emails circulating, the assumption was coming from our secretary. The assumption was that this was for a meeting with the superintendent. At the end of the day, that by the time I read that email, after Ms. President Craighead and the board secretary were trying to reach out to me, and I responded, it was too late. The meeting had been held. And so when I sent an email to our board president, I got the response that she was out and would not be available until after Thanksgiving break. At that time, and so when she was back, I did get an email, and I was told that the only time available to meet with me, since I had already missed that meeting, was yesterday at 4:00. So, while I think they are important, I do believe that there should have been. So I think it's great that we had our board member present, and I do believe that the voice of students is critical here. And but also think that there should have been more than one elected official deciding which 3 board guardrails were going to be selected. So, so while I think that they are important, and I do believe we need them, and I, quite frankly, also agree with the ones that are presented to us, because I wholeheartedly believe that in those board guardrails. I also believe that there's others that are also critical, and my vote will reflect here that I firmly believe that there should have been 2 elected officials, plus our student board member, deciding which were the 3 board guardrails that would be recommended to the board.
I concur completely, but point to be made was, yes, all of these are important, but a few of them are covered by board bylaws, which is why they were not included. For example, proposed 15, the proposed guardrail 15 is covered by bylaw 9005, I believe. Bylaw 14 covered by 90100, and then another bylaw 11 was covered by 9005 as well. That's all.
I would just like to address the timing of everything. And what you're referring to about the meeting being held without you is the fact that the morning after our board meeting, where we volunteered to participate in the committee, our superintendent sent out an email looping in our coach and also asking for our availability. And our coach weighed in that day. I also weighed in that day, and I gave my available dates. The emails went back and forth that day on Thursday, November 6th, and then, as I said, our coach responded. The dates were given by myself to our board secretary, who was checking in with our student board member, and kind of in protection of our student board member's time, our board secretary was emailing her separately so that we weren't interfering with her school schedule. And we waited a week and didn't hear from you. And that included a text from the board secretary. So after waiting a week, I decided that because we also have, so we burned a week trying to schedule it, and then there was a week off for Thanksgiving. That's 2 weeks out of a 30-day period that we decided on, that we needed to hold the meeting because otherwise we would run out of time. So I chose to honor our student board member schedule, and I met with her with our coach. Our coach was present at the meeting and guided us in the work. And then I sent out a follow-up email saying, okay, to the committee, and you were included in that email, a follow-up email saying, this is the result of the work of the committee. So I think it needs to be balanced, the part where who was included in the committee work. I think that needs to be balanced information going out.
Yeah, and to be clear, that happened that week following. Given that we had a month to work on it, as I told you yesterday, there was never the expectation, at least for me, and I will take that responsibility, that I would be asked that same week to meet, that week that followed our meeting, and also, I firmly believe that yes, we should have been accommodating to our student board member. I work, so I wouldn't have been available in the morning. And so that would have been still a real possibility, and meet with one and then meet with the other. But at the end of the day, I'm glad that meeting did take place. But again, my vote will reflect that I still firmly believe that to go from 15 board guardrails that are recommended to 3 with only 1 elected official deciding with our student board member, I think that there should have been another elected official, and so therefore my vote will reflect that.
There will actually be 5 elected officials deciding on the guardrails.
Absolutely.
Excuse me. There will actually be 5 elected officials voting on the guardrails. So it wasn't one elected official coming up with the guardrails. It'll be the 5 of us voting. And in the interest of time, we will take that vote now.
Yes,
I'll
I do have
our
something to say.
Board secretary
And,
take a roll
President
call.
Craighead, please
Excuse
allow
me?
me to finish before we take.
But you're
the vote.
out of order.
Oh, okay. We have new bylaws, so I will silence myself now.
Thank you. I'll ask our board secretary to take a roll call vote. And I'll just remind everybody that the motion is to accept the 3 guardrails being brought forward by the committee. Thank you.
Member Lopez?
No.
Member Otto? President Craighead?
Aye.
Member Benitez?
Aye.
Member Miller?
Aye.
And Student Board Member Nuala?
Aye.
That is 4 yes, 1 no.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 16.3.
Just point of clarification, can we have the record reflect that we had a preferential vote as well?
Yes, thank you. That's 4 yes, 1 no, and 1 preferential vote.
Thank you. It's kind of important on that one. Yes. So the next item on the agenda is 16.3, also student outcome focused, but this time with the implementation timeline. And before we get started on discussion with, community engagement, there's also something coming up on our implementation timeline, which is a community training. And so as we did with the item of the guardrails, I'd like to send this out for a committee also. So this is going to be separate from the community engagement meetings, and our coach, Greg, would like to be a part of this, but I need some 2 volunteers to work on that community training committee. So do we have 2 volunteers?
Tell me more about what it is.
Well, this would be under the continuous improvement section of the self-evaluation tool. So if you have the self-evaluation tool,
Give me the page.
continuous improvement is on 7 and, oh, it's on I'm looking at a different, okay. You said that was page 4?
It's page 7 of the manual, but it's page 224 of the board packet.
224 of, thank you for that. I keep an extra copy in my binder. So page 224, if you're looking at tonight's packet. So it would be under meeting, student outcomes focus, in the green column, the second paragraph down. The board has hosted and the board members have led or co-led at least one training session on student outcomes focused governance during the previous 12-month period. And then bonus points if we include our student board member.
So I think it's important that we also speak to the values in which, why this committee is important. When we're talking about all of the hard work that has gone into doing our Vision 2035, when we talk about all of the hard work that has gone into doing our community outreach to getting their input on what we feel would be the most important values represented by not only our district, but by the board, we want to make sure that there is a level of continuity of those values from the potential next board members come each election cycle. Along with that, there is the opportunity to also build a certain, let's call it certain awareness and kind of culture building in regards to all of the great work that is going on. And so when it comes to these trainings in particular, it will have both of those undertones in regards to not only what is SOFG work, but it also will speak to a lot of the work that has been done as a district to help us get to this point.
If you're taking volunteers, President Craighead,
I am.
I volunteer.
Great. Do we have any other volunteers for this committee?
Volunteer.
Okay, so that's members Otto and Benitez.
I think since we're constituting this, I don't know if you're going this way, President Craighead, but I think we should take a vote to formally constitute.
The board committee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Would you like to make that motion?
So if my colleagues are okay with it, move to constitute this, I'll call it Community Training Committee
That's fine.
on student outcomes focused governance with board member Otto and myself.
Second.
Any discussion?
We didn't give a timeline onto when they would report back.
So I think the
well, I guess you don't technically-
self-evaluation
yeah, I guess you
says
technically
that
don't
within
need to.
within 12 months, we have to have a training. Doesn't mean that we will
Yeah.
have it within.
Yeah, I guess you're right, because now it's a committee. We'll be doing monthly follow-up on it anyway, right?
I think the clock starts now.
Yeah, my apologies. Yeah, you're correct. I
It
just wanted to
actually
make sure.
comes up in, this isn't that it has to be done, but on the Long Beach Unified SOFG timeline, which is page 263 of materials, your coach will be tracking for us that it comes up as an action item added to the timeline. It doesn't say that it has to be completed in January, but you will get status and green status if you're activating on that.
Great.
Yeah. And from our implementation team meeting that the coach, Greg Klein, participates in, as well as Eric and Diana, he has volunteered to do as much, but wants the board representatives to be a part of it, but he will support in any way that he can, including holding a virtual event, anything he's spoken to between a 90-minute session to a 2-day institute. And we heard, you'll remember when we were at our 2-day institute, Fresno talked about actually having multiple of these community events and trying out both 2-day, a 1-day, a half-day. So it was well received in their community, just learning more about what it means to take this approach. And then also they expressed the experience of having a sense of partnership by community organizations that went through the training to see how they could actually support the district's efforts.
Yep.
Okay, so all in favor of having members Otto and Benitez serve on a committee for this training, say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Our student board member?
Aye.
So that passes 5-0 with a preferential vote. And then while we're on this topic, Member Miller, did you have something that you'd like to include?
Yeah, it was really small. It's actually probably more for Jeff than anybody. Point of clarity, so moving forward on each board agenda, there will be a set aside for this committee to give a report out, or is that only if they have a report out?
I think it's at the will of the board in terms of how the report out, whether we have the standing item related to the implementation, so it can be brought back at any time during the implementation. We do slightly modify that board agenda item each time if there is going to be something that will be addressed. And so if the committee has something, we will note it in the agenda item that the committee would be reporting on during the implementation timeline standing item.
Got it. Thank you. I apologize for being a little out of order. I just wanted to make sure we had the clarity. Thank you.
Okay. So are we ready to move on to the next agenda item?
President Craighead, also as part of that item, there was a notation about community engagement and revisiting the planned community engagement for January, and an opportunity for board members to reflect on the first session and bring forward some additional ideas and thoughts that have emerged since then from what we learned and from some new ideas. And I know Mr. Otto is the planned lead for the January session, so I don't want you to skip that, because I think there are some ideas that are to be considered.
And I didn't think we were finished with the entire thing. I just thought we had voted to constitute the committee, President Craighead.
Okay. Okay, so Member Otto, would you like to report on that?
No, and I'll tell you why, because I was going to bring it up in my comments, and since it's not an action item, and I'm going to tell you in the comment section what I would tell you now, it's redundant at worst, and you'll get the information.
I do have a potential discussion item related to the community engagement.
Oh,
check-in.
Go ahead.
Notwithstanding that I haven't heard what your comments are going to be yet, Doug, so if I need to modify accordingly, I'll do that.
See if I roll my eyes.
Okay. I'll look this way then. I was going to see if there was an opportunity, given that we have this next meeting in January, to take some of the learnings that were discussed from the previous community check-in, sort of on two levels. One is to gain some clarity around expectations and responsibilities on the community engagement efforts themselves, to make sure that we have great turnout, participation. And then directly related to that, and I'm happy to type up some bullet points together, get them to us before our next meeting, some thoughts on how to stick to the spirit and the intent of the meeting, but perhaps modify the actual format, but not removing the substance and the content, so that if we are going to ask people to come, we can try to be as engaging with a format that's engaging as possible. It would not be an exhaustive thing, just some thoughts for us to take into consideration as Mr. Otto is planning that January meeting. And then one question, who are the two board members in addition to Mr. Otto for the January meeting, Jill?
You'll have to ask Mr. Otto that question.
Because is it me, Doug?
No.
Okay. Okay. So that was my suggestion.
Okay.
Okay. So I believe we're ready to move on.
So
is it okay for me to do that?
We'll receive
Yes.
your materials and actually can, if there's something that you'd like posted with the public agenda
For the
at the end of this
next,
week, for next
meeting,
week's
yes.
meeting.
Yes.
And then anything else that you all want attached, you'll share with us for public posting of the agenda.
With the consideration for that January and then any meetings after that.
Great.
And now we're moving on the agenda? Just want to make sure I'm giving everybody an opportunity. Okay. So, agenda item 16.4, the Multilingual Learner Master Plan, and that's an information item. We had a presentation earlier this afternoon, but I know that we left off at some point, and so
I
I'm
think we
looking
got
over.
through the 7th chapter. I think we did get
Yes,
through the
I think it
seventh
was
chapter.
something about a journey.
Yes.
So I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Moskovitz. Thank you.
Yeah, we would definitely like to talk about the journey, and partially because the feedback that came from the Board of Education last spring, some of the feedback was including an opportunity to reach out to community groups and community partners and our parents. And we're really proud that our team did a really effective job of that. So Dr. Myers-Miller is going to talk about how her team at OCIPD really engaged in that journey with community partners. So if you, again, those at home, we're back to the same presentation from earlier today. So for people at home, this is in the 3 o'clock special session packet. It's on page 183 of 195 of the 3 o'clock special session. I'll give the board a moment to get back to that, page 183. And so we'll talk about that journey, the engagement with community, and then more importantly, and actually probably most importantly in all of this, is the plan is great. We think it's very comprehensive, but it's not going to mean anything if we don't do something with it. And so you'll hear a little bit about our plans moving forward to really make sure that our entire system is supporting our English learners.
As we had the opportunity earlier to hear from Dr. Gonzalez and also Catherine, who were the key drivers and supporters of the development committee and their writing team around the development of the plan and all of the areas in which they have focused in the research to ensure that our language learners had a comprehensive support. We want to lean into what Mr. Moskovitz is talking about. We can have a plan, but we always have to have, so what, now what? And so we want to talk about the journey that led us to really make some comprehensive changes that are in support of our community, but also what we're going to do with this plan so that our students have a better experience and acquire English learning as the proficiency moving forward. All right. As was shared earlier, we know that this plan came to fruition after 2 years of active work, researching and developing, looking at data, engaging with community members, and so brought forth this initial plan back in March. And one of the things that we heard from the board was that we really needed to take this plan back and hear from the community, is this the plan that will accelerate and really be what is needed for our learners? And as Catherine was sharing earlier about each specific chapter, she leaned into what within the stakeholder community groups when bringing forth this chapter for revision and for communication, what each of them shared about what was needed to support. So we use that impetus from the board as it relates to engaging with the community to make those revisions, and that has been a part of the journey. We engaged specifically over the last several months with some input sessions with DLAC and some other community organizations. We also involved teachers in the process for supporting us in language revisions, but most importantly, within those revisions, were those going to be ones that were going to be a better service and support to our specific students. I want you to really lean into that when we're talking about the scope of EL learners and the needs of our community. We're talking about various organizations and community members within our community that really wanted to see differences and really wanted to see change. And they all leaned in and supported with being a part of their hopes and dreams for our students in our community. So in March, we engaged, excuse me, uh-oh. I got it. Maybe not. There you go, okay. In March, we brought who our community engaged with, and we were called to ask for more engagement. And as I said earlier, that was something that really benefited the overall development of our plan. And so, during the last 6 months, these are the community organizations that we engaged in that really supported our work. We want to lean into all the facets of our community, from the Kamai organizations to our social justice organizations, and also some of our language Spanish organizations as well, really helping to uplift the revisions that are needed within the plan. And it's really a community outreach and support that has led into successful implementation. So some of the key takeaways from the community, Catherine kind of uplifted these, but I want to kind of lean into them and to really see that these are the voices that are part of what our community is asking us. The plan is not just a plan for compliance, it's a plan for action. And the community is asking us to act differently so that we have different supports and services for our kids so that they achieve better. And it's calling that, number one, that there's a recognition of multilingualism as an asset in classrooms and schools across the district, that one language is not what we're looking for. We're looking for all students to be identify and have cultural respect for all of the assets that they bring. We're looking to ensure that our students have robust language heritage programs, that when they come into our schools, that their home language is uplifted and it's valued. We're looking to ensure that we have designated and integrated ELD programs and practices throughout every school. I know that that is something that we was called out and asked for earlier. What are the designated supports in our system, in our elementary classrooms? And if you look within the plan, I have to look, I think it's on page 56, 57, we outline specifically what are those expectations that we have across our system for all of our teachers to ensure that our students who are coming with language needs are getting those specific services and supports. That we are clearly communicating about English learner identification, reclassification, and related exams. Catherine uplifted that, and I believe Dr. Gonzalo also uplifted that, but that when our language learner parents are coming into the schools, that they are not always having a clear understanding of how their students will matriculate the system and achieve proficiency. Lastly, ensuring that we are progress monitoring, and that as we are progress monitoring, we're ensuring that our students are moving toward those rigors and standards that are expected. And Catherine also uplifted that right now, as of earlier this month, we had over 87% of the program evaluation information that was being for our students who have language needs. And I think that that's important because that means that we're actively monitoring and we're actively engaging in looking at data, making sure that we know who our students are and are providing additional services and supports for them. So those were some of the key takeaways that were uplifted earlier in the presentation, but also that were used as revisions to support an active plan of what the community would want and need. And that kind of gives a overall completion of the journey that we're bringing forth to you, but I would like to share a couple of highlights that are important for us to know. That the plan that is being, that we're talking about, these are things that are already a part of what are happening in our schools. Yes, we already have integrated and designated ELD that's happening in our school. We have revisions of courses to support our secondary schools for ELD courses that have been revised. We have intervention supports for students. So many components of the plan are already in play. We are just ensuring that we are providing system-wide supports and that every school has the same exact experience and exposure to supporting their language learners.
One thing I'll add, and then we can definitely open it up to questions, and maybe you can help me with this as well, Dr. Myers-Miller. So we're tonight is an information item. We're going to have a discussion. We're happy to take feedback that you may offer. Next week, it'll be before you for approval. We are designing based on, assuming there will be approval, we're designing a plan for implementation and rollout into 2026. That's going to include an English Learner Symposium that we're planning for late March, an opportunity to really bring our community together, to hear from our community, hear from our families, hear from our students. What about this plan do they see as a strength already in place? Where are some areas we can improve? And really to bring like a true symposium where we're both providing information but also learning from our community. So that's going to be an exciting opportunity. We're also then planning what would rollout and implementation look like in our schools? How do we make sure that over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, our administrators and our teachers and all of our educators are aware of the plan? It's a big book, so we want to make sure we're going to have to take some time to kind of break it down and help people understand by classification kind of some of the expectations. So we're excited about the not just the approval, hopeful approval next week, but the implementation that will come over the coming 6 months. And you heard Ms. Perez say earlier, we really learned a lot. We appreciated the push that you as a board gave back in the spring to say, what about more community engagement specific related to this plan? And as you heard her say, that's not done. So I think it was chapter 6. She said it's a good place where we are now, but it's not completed. It will continue to evolve. And so we're excited to engage through symposium and other ways to continue to hear from community and from parents. How do we see this being implemented effectively moving forward? Anything you'd add to that?
No.
So yeah, we'll open it up to questions, comments, recommendations, and so that we can be prepared for a vote next week.
Yeah, Brian, thank you, Dr. Myers-Miller. So I'm left with the key takeaways from family and community because we started, this started, right, uplifting community engagement as a pillar, not just in informing the contents of the plan, but as you said, that it's an ongoing evolution or involvement. But I want to anchor it in the accountability piece. And I love how Dr. Myers-Miller just shared, this isn't just about compliance, all right? It's about action for many of the things that are included in the plan that are aspirational. Some we're doing, but others is aspirational. Some we could either be doing more of or be doing better or more consistently, right? So and I'm moved by the takeaways as well, and I know that the actual, and this is just in the presentation, I know the actual plan will continue to have key takeaways. Since community engagement is a major pillar of every aspect, I would say, of this plan, and addressing some of those things that we could do more of and better of, I'd really like to hear your thoughts on what mechanisms we could use to make sure that if and when, and my expectation is an if, not a when, if depending on what you all think, we get updates to the implementation of the plan. I would really like to see the updates be anchored around the takeaways from family and community, because those are actionable, real things that families and community members are telling us either are not happening consistently, and or could overall be better. So my suggestion, and then I just have a quick question, is if we are exploring how this then would be brought back to the board or back to community, that we be very explicit in including updates regarding the key takeaways. And that could be either progress made to, steps taken, actions, maybe short-term, mid-term, longer-term actions, because I think if we are going to continue to honor community engagement and community participation and have folks' time feel like they're valued, then I think it behooves us to demonstrate back to community, here's what we've taken and included in the plan, and here's what we're doing about those things that we could be doing better or could be doing more consistently. So that's my sort of open-ended question on thoughts about that. And then I do have a question around translation. I saw that the executive summary was translated into Spanish. I see the thank you here in 3 languages. May I presume that we are going to, once we finalize this thing and if it's adopted, that it will be translated into other languages? Again, sticking to this community engagement pillar.
Yes, and it is actually already translated. We were waiting for some feedback just to see if there was anything else we wanted to bring into next week, but we will be ready to post up for next week the plan fully translated in Spanish and Khmer as well. So that's the second part. To the first part, I mean, I really appreciate Dr. Baker's bringing up and kind of push, like, what if we did a symposium? What if we brought together our community around this work? And so then to your question, Dr. Benitez, I can imagine not being a one-time symposium, but an annual opportunity to convene with our community. And I can imagine that these takeaways are an initial in March. This is what we heard, and how might that show up? Because sometimes you can have phrases, but what does that actually look like in implementation? And we could set some goals for ourselves and have an annual opportunity with community, with our English learners and their families and caregivers. What would it look like to each year check back in with this and maybe even develop and have it be a fluid document as well?
As I expressed earlier, so thank you for the work, and the only thing is, as expressed earlier, I think that we should look at the title and consider English Learner Master Plan. I understand multilingual learner is for the asset-based terminology, but I think it's important to stay consistent with the state, and using English learner would not only emphasize that students need to learn the English language, but we would be consistent with the California dashboard, with the EL roadmap, unduplicated students, and with the LCAP. So this is something that I brought up earlier this morning or earlier today, and I think that we should really highly consider changing the name of the plan.
Mr. Otto, did you have something?
Not about that. I was just going to say about the plan that we got it presented to us in a draft form 6 months ago or so at a workshop, and I was very impressed with it at that point, and it made me think about a lot of things that I hadn't considered before, and I find this version even better. And I had an opportunity to talk with Ms. Gonzalez and Dr. Perez Morales about this way back then, and to study this a little more closely. And I think this is a great step for our district to do, and I wholeheartedly support it. I think that the rollout is important, like you suggested. I kind of wince that we're getting all these things that we're doing and meetings and whatnot, and I'm wondering if I'm going to have time for the 10-minute breaks we get to try and get all this stuff done. It's what happens oftentimes when you get going on these things is all the good ideas get put into what it is that you're doing. I'm not suggesting we not do that. In fact, I think it's very important for this, but I just I support it. The rollout, I support reports back to the board periodically when things happen, not just as a matter of course, but congratulations. I can't imagine that there's any place else in the state of California that has put as much time and effort and thought into this subject than we have, and so congratulations to everyone.
I do feel like an imposter in this specific situation here, but I would like to uplift that Dr. Gonzalez and Catherine and her team did an amazing job in bringing this to fruition. So it has really been, and it's a passion because as language learners themselves, they really want to ensure that the students who look like them and represent have their own cultural identity are seen in our schools and receive the adequate supports and programs for them to be uplifted. So please, it is definitely their labor of love and passion of love because of the care for the students in whom we all serve and wanting better for them.
Dr. Myers-Miller, I hope that they watched at least this part of tonight's meeting because that passion and that love shows through in so many regards.
And their writing team, please forgive me.
So thank you, everyone. I think we're ready to move on to item 16.5. And as we changed with the adoption of the agenda to just school closure, and this is an information item. I see people getting into place to address this. So, Mr. Miranda, would you like to start us off?
I'm going to just kick us off, and then I will hand directly to Brian. So tonight, you heard mention of in our fiscal stabilization and prioritization plan about school closure. You all, as a board, experienced this when we had to make the hard decision around the closure of Hudson and the tremendous care that was provided to that community as we faced that challenge. So tonight is an information item to explore and to understand the necessity of the closure of Hoover Middle School, and simultaneously the opportunity that we're going to use the campus to expand our dual language middle school program. And so we have two team members that will speak specifically around expansion of dual language programming in Brian, and Mr. Miranda to speak to the capacity analysis and the decision relative to Hoover. And so I think I'm handing off directly to Brian. Thank you for starting with that. And thanks, we can see both of you out there together. That's very nice.
Sometimes it's hard to communicate when I'm turned to the side, so we'll do it from here. If we can get the slides up, that would be great. And they are up, perfect. I'm going to start actually with this week. Monday and Tuesday night this week, we were out in community, starting Monday night with our Hoover parents, caregivers, students in place. And then Tuesday night, we were out at the Keller community and talking and hearing from parents, answering questions. And I want to start there because I know this is really, this is hard, as Dr. Baker said. This is challenging. It lands heavy for students and for families who are trying to figure out where their kid's going to go. They have a lot of questions. I will say in both places, parents were incredibly gracious and understanding of where we're at as a district and the need. And we were also trying to be equally gracious with them. So while this is definitely hard to be able to have to get in front of folks and let them know a school may be closing, we do believe it is the right decision to make. So there are actually four things that we're going to talk about tonight. The vote that will ultimately come before you all next week is a vote to close Hoover Middle School. And then a second item that you will consider next week is, assuming you vote for the closure of Hoover Middle School, will be a realignment of the consolidation of the attendance boundary that is currently Hoover with Bancroft Middle School. So we're going to speak through the why for the closure of Hoover Middle School. We're going to speak to the transition plan for the students who are currently attending Hoover and what that will look like for them to transition to Bancroft Middle School. And then second, we're going to come back to, we're actually going to skip and come back to the idea of our expanding need for more space for our middle school dual language program. So while we have the hard situation of the closure of Hoover Middle School, we actually also have an equally exciting opportunity to expand our dual language middle school program because of increasing interest. So we're kind of balancing both things, the difficult decision, but also a need to build and to grow our middle school program. So there are three areas that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the school capacity. I'll go reverse in those bullet points there. We're going to talk about the school capacity, and Mr. Miranda will speak to that. You've heard referenced earlier today in our 3 o'clock session, we've heard about declining enrollment, but you're going to hear about even increased declining enrollment at Hoover specifically. And then we'll come back, and I'll join you back again to talk specifically about the dual language program, Keller Middle School, and the need to expand and move Keller to a larger campus. So we're actually going to jump, just letting you all know if you want to move ahead. We're going to go to slide 7. It's also page 283 in the board packet for those maybe following along at home. So we're going to skip ahead to that. I'll hand it off to Mr. Miranda, and then I'll come back with you in a few minutes.
Perfect, and you'll see that transition slide titled School Capacity Analysis, and that's what I'll speak to. So I figured before jumping into the actual data that helped inform this decision as well, I'd provide a little context, maybe a little bit of a refresher for the board with respect to our capacity utilization study and how we go about framing that data. And also a refresher for the public. As Dr. Baker noted, we addressed similar type of data and information as structured a little over a year ago with the Hudson decision. But I figure the context is helpful for today because we're using a whole bunch of terms in the facilities world that may not be familiar to other folks. So I'll start with the fact that school districts across the state of California are required to assess capacities at their school sites on an annual basis. That said, there's quite a bit of latitude with respect to how we calculate and develop a formula for doing so. Most districts out there use what we call design capacity. So what was a building designed to house, how many classrooms are out there, attach a loading factor to each classroom, and just do the simple math to develop a rough capacity, which we call design capacity in our formula. We felt we wanted to go a step deeper, actually a few steps deeper, and develop what we call program capacity. So how are we actually utilizing our space everywhere, right? And our facilities team does a really good job with respect to actually carefully assessing every space at every school site and how it's actually used on an annual basis, because things change on a regular basis, right? There could be sped rooms, which are at a different loading factor at one particular school one year. That could shift from year to year to a different location. Perhaps there's a space designated for career tech. Maybe there's an undersized classroom at a school. We want to make sure those type of spaces don't count against a school's capacity, and we have a true and correct formula for assessing what the space situation looks like at each respective school site. So that's a little bit of context and perhaps a few definitions with respect to design capacity versus what we call program capacity, and that's really what we hone in on for these type of decisions. That said, let's jump into some data here on a few school sites. So Hoover, and you're going to see the term right there, program capacity for Hoover is a little over 1,200 students. That's how many students we feel can comfortably fit at this school site. And of course, you see their enrollment listed at 477. So when we look at their capacity formula, do the math, let the formula do its job, we're showing that we're only utilizing 38% of the space, classroom space, at this particular campus. That gives us quite a bit of wiggle room. For context, and again, referencing back to our decision a little over a year ago on Hudson, when we looked at capacity information and utilization information and made that decision, Hudson was an absolute outlier, in particular for elementary schools, right, where we were using roughly 20% of that space. I think it was a little less. This particular year where we focused in on all schools, but we had a drill down focus on middle schools, we looked at two metrics. There were very similar metrics from what we looked at with Hudson. Metric one was, let's identify school sites that are only using 45% or less of, and then let's also assess schools that are using 60% or less space if we were to remove portables from all campuses. Of all our middle schools in the district, Hudson was the only middle school that checked both boxes. So that was a definite, Hoover, definite noticing for us as we looked at that data. Just continuing on with the data and the storytelling with respect to Hoover campus, have a footnote here, kind of a reminder to self to recognize that we started construction at this campus recently, just this past summer. For our middle school campus modernizations and HVAC installs and accessibility improvements, those projects typically run 18 to 19 months or so. We're on track, we're doing well, scheduled to complete that particular project early in the calendar year of 27. Which is an important distinction as we go deeper into the presentation. You'll see the enrollment trend, and Brian teased this nicely. District-wide, we've seen a decline, right? So we continue to see a decline across many of our campuses. At Hoover in particular, that decline is at a multiplier of 3, right? So it's just declining at a much faster pace, which is something that's going to draw our attention. Shifting gears to Bancroft. So Bancroft, when we look at program capacity using the same formula and metrics, we know that we can house comfortably 1,400 students. And that's a big number. It's a big school. It's also been renovated, so it's a great campus. Current enrollment at this particular campus is just over 770, which brings their program capacity utilization rate to 55%. The reason that's important here is it gives us a cushion, right? So we know there's available space on this particular campus. Again, referencing back to our story about a little over a year ago at Hudson, we also looked at schools within close proximity that have available capacity and have been renovated. And that's the story we're telling here again, right? So Bancroft campus being roughly 1.5 miles down the street from Hoover, having available capacity. When we look at their enrollment trend in the 7-year history, you see a decline. It's not as significant, but it still gives us that wiggle room nonetheless. And an important point I want to reference on this particular slide is the student plot map. You see a little map there at the top right-hand corner. Every one of those specific dots represents a student attending this school. The distinction here is, of course, you see the concentration there within the true Bancroft boundary, but you also see, if you just kind of look over to the left, you see several students within the plot points that reside within the Hoover boundary already attending Bancroft. So that was a very important noticing for us along the way. Shifting gears to Keller. So in terms of Keller's capacity, there's a few notes I want to leave you all with. One, or first and foremost, this particular school site started as an elementary school campus and then shifted and became a middle school campus. Important for a number of reasons, right? It's by and large smaller classrooms. In particular, when we look at some of their elective classrooms like band, they're just smaller footprints, smaller spaces, and there's not enough in terms of capacity to house more students. Brian will speak a whole lot more towards the trend, the enrollment that's coming through the system with interest in dual immersion, so I won't go there just now. But when you look at the current enrollment and the current capacities and our constraints there, clearly we don't have enough wiggle room and space to be able to house all the students and families that have an interest in dual immersion programs. Do want to note before I transition to the next slide, Keller is also a campus where HVAC modernization has been complete. And that's an important distinction for us in the facilities world, I think for all of you as well, just as we want to be good stewards of public funds and the bond fund in particular in this case. For us, what really screamed out to us is how do we repurpose this space, right? So it cannot house many more dual immersion families, but we know it's a good footprint to be able to house different programs. So currently what we've looked at is programs that are housed over at the Tucker site, centrally located, a good facility, but it's not renovated. And Tucker remains on our list for Measure E remodel, but the thinking here was if we can shift those programs over to a different facility, in this case Keller, that's been renovated, not only is it making us more efficient with our use of modernized space, but it actually fast tracks their ability to get into a renovated space, right? Because as we know, when we start on those construction projects on the Measure E side, there's programming and planning and designing and state agency approvals and bidding before we even break ground on the construction efforts. So what we're looking at in particular here is the ACT program, the adult transition program that's currently housed at Tucker. And we see a direct fit over at the Keller site. As we talked to our partner departments here, and Dr. Sosa Valderrama in particular, something we heard was, look, if we ever consider a shift for the program, please house the program somewhere within close proximity to public transportation and to business communities, because these students get out there into community to do work, and Keller definitely checks that box for us as well. We're also looking at the medical therapy unit that's housed currently at Tucker for potential relocation over to the Keller site that would keep those functions together. And there's staff members from OSSS that are housed at the Tucker site, and we're still assessing that piece. So if there's a direct fit for them over at Keller, we'll consider that as well. Otherwise, we'll look for a different location prior to making a final decision for those staff members.
All right, so I'm going to have us now, we're going to jump back into your packet. We're going to go back to slide 3. We'll go back to 3. And for those, again, following at home, that is page 279 of the board agenda packet. So with the capacity analysis completed, we know that with the decline of overall student enrollment in the district over the last 6 years at about 11%, and as Mr. Miranda said, 3 times that, 34% decline at Hoover, with about 218 of the 477 students there on choice, currently attending on choice. We made the tough decision from a budgetary standpoint, with the overall budget context that we have right now as a district, to recommend the closure of Hoover Middle School. And then as I referenced, at the same time, not for the same reason, but at the same time, we have been for a few years now looking at our dual language program at the middle school level. We have seen a pretty marked increase, and we anticipate even greater increase in the number of students who are leaving 5th grade from a dual language program seeking a dual language middle school program. The graph here on the right, I'll just kind of explain what it shows. just for those maybe at home, it's a little small. This last year in June, about 319 students left our 5th grade dual language programs across our district. That's across 7 sites. And of those 319, about 70% were seeking to continue their middle school through a dual language program. We've had Keller Middle School in place now for several years. It started out as a Henry K-8. About 10 years ago, it transitioned to become Keller Middle School and Henry Elementary. Of those 319 last year that promoted out of 5th grade, about 70% sought a middle school of choice for dual language. Most of them opted for Keller. That was their first choice. We also, knowing that we had increasing numbers, we began to try a program over at Stevens Middle School. The difference with Stevens and Keller is a school-wide model. The entire school is dual language. Stevens was just a pathway within a larger middle school. And, parents get to choose. So through the choice process, the vast majority of the parents leaving elementary dual language opted for Keller as their number one choice. We were able to accommodate that last year with those 319 students. About 30 students are in a dual language program at Stevens. That's very different, one class at Stevens versus an entire school at Keller. But you can see this currently, if you go one bar over there from the right, we currently have about 380 5th graders right now in dual language programs. And the reason that's more than last year is because Chavez Elementary is promoting 5th graders out of their dual language program for the first time. We started that program in 2019-20 as kindergartners. They are now 5th graders ready to find a middle school program. And if we assume, like they have, that 70% of them will likely seek a middle school dual language program, we know that we are not going to have the capacity at Keller for those who are seeking it as a first choice. This next year, we could continue to try to accommodate at Stevens as a second opportunity, but we know that families are seeking the school-wide model. That is really the best way to build the bicultural, biliterate individual through that whole school model. I'm going to take you 2 more bars over, and if you get to our current 3rd graders, we have 471 3rd graders in elementary dual language programs. That jump to 3rd grade is because Riley Elementary is the oldest students in dual language at Riley are in 3rd grade. 4 years ago, they started as kinders and are now making their way, matriculating through. So when we get to the place where 471 students are promoting out of 5th grade dual language, seeking a middle school program, if you take that average of 70% wanting to continue with dual language for middle school, that's about 350 students. You heard the capacity at Keller is a total of 575. It's about 190 students per grade level at Keller in 6th, 7th, and 8th. That's the capacity. So if you think about in just a few years, 350 5th graders leaving, seeking a dual language middle school program, there will absolutely not be space at Keller for that. Why this is important? For a couple reasons. Obviously, space is an issue. But Keller is a completely school of choice school. There is no attendance boundary, residential attendance boundary. There never has been. It is all about choice. So families, as they leave 5th grade, can if they've been in a dual language elementary program, can choose an option of Keller dual language as their choice. If we do not make a because so many families want Keller as their number one choice, leaving dual language elementary programs, if we do not make a accommodation and make a change on the size of the campus for Keller, within just next year and within a couple of years, we're going to have as many as half of our families wanting to go to Keller as their first choice that will not be able to go. And so we've been able to accommodate for the most part over several years, but with the rapid growth we see in our elementary programs, we won't be able to accommodate that going forward. And that's across all of our 7 programs, Henry, Bixby, Lafayette, and all of them. So we know the numbers are telling us that we have an increasing growth. The other real challenge that we've been grappling with is about the accessibility of the campus to our families. So you see the 7 campuses that currently have an elementary dual language program: Bixby, Chavez, Henry, Lafayette, Riley, Webster, Willard, throughout our district. If you go to the bottom of the arrow, if you will, the bottom of the arrow on this map is where Keller is approximately located. The tip of the arrow is where approximately Hoover is located. What's really interesting about this visual is that like on the other maps that Mr. Miranda had showed previously, the red dots represent where current Keller students live. So our current Keller students coming from all 7 of these elementary programs live throughout our community. And they are all traveling to get to Keller currently at a school that will not have the capacity to meet the need going forward. So in addition to shifting Keller to the Hoover site, we'll meet two, I think, goals for ourselves. One is the capacity, most importantly. But two, it's also creating a little bit more accessibility. It's not perfectly centralized, but it's more centrally located than Keller currently is to provide a little bit easier transportation for those families throughout the community.
Brian, I feel compelled to interject because I shared this with you yesterday. In my school visits to Chavez, one of the salient questions that came up from parents at Chavez is, where are we going to be able to send our dual immersion students? So if Chavez parents are listening right now, I'm sure they're loving this news.
Yeah. And I'll share a little bit more about what we're thinking about around accessibility as well.
And actually they did receive a letter as part of the communications last week, so aware of what we're working on. Yeah.
So what does this mean for students? Most essentially and in a most timely way, we're concerned about the Hoover students and the Hoover families. The plan is to close Hoover Middle School at the end of the 25-26 school year. This school year, Hoover Middle School will close. And we have space, and our plan is for all of those students that want to go from Hoover to Bancroft, we will have space for them to do so. We also know, and we talked to families on Monday at Hoover, we also know that there may be families that want a different school option rather than Bancroft. And so we are going to have a prioritized school of choice process for available spaces at other middle schools. It may not necessarily be adding additional staff at other middle schools, but we have middle schools now that currently are projected to have space in 7th and 8th grade, because we're talking about the current 6th and 7th grade students at Hoover. The 8th grade students will promote to high school. So we are anticipating they will all go to Bancroft. That is our plan. But we're also going to, through Mr. Samuel's office, we're going to engage in a prioritized school of choice process for those families. And I'll explain a little bit more of the timing on that. Then with the School of Residence, the attendance boundary, that will also come before you next week. The plan would be that the current Hoover residential attendance boundary will merge with the current Bancroft attendance boundary. And so for incoming 6th graders who reside in the Hoover attendance area, their School of Residence now will be Bancroft, but they will also be able to engage in the School of Choice process like all of our 5th grade students do. So that's kind of the short-term plan. We are working, part of what we talked with families, we shared a lot of broad information on Monday, but we also were hearing from families like very specific, unique situations that they had. And so we'll be working with individual families on the specific needs of their students and try to accommodate their requests and their needs. So I'm going to jump ahead back one more time, last jump. I appreciate the flexibility with that. And now we're going to go to slide 14 and page 290 in the packet. Just want to share a little bit of some of our next steps. The overall objectives that we really were trying to achieve here. Of course, operational efficiency. Currently, Hoover is not being utilized in an efficient way. While it's hard to move families, it's really the right thing to do from a budgetary utilization standpoint. And simultaneously, we have a very dire need for increased capacity for our middle school dual language program. So it's allowing us to build out our school-wide dual language model and provide increased access not in spaces alone, but also in location within the community. Just a couple of our just points for you to know from an outreach standpoint, and Dr. Baker alluded to some of this. So the board recommendation came in front of you. Came in front of you last week. We were very intentional in the way we sequence communication. Anytime you're closing a school, impacting staff, impacting students, impacting families, we want to hold that with sensitivity and care. And so last week, we notified the principals just about a day or two in advance. We communicated with elementary principals at dual language sites, knowing that they would likely receive questions as well from families. We went out in a really intentional way out to staff meetings on Thursday. So Mr. Samuels, Dr. Ahn, Dr. Brown were at Hoover, meeting with Hoover staff Thursday afternoon. Myself, Dr. Myers-Miller, and some others were out at Keller to be able to share the news with those staff. And basically, while we were in the meetings, we sequenced through Elviacano's support and the communications office support. We had communication ready to go. So while we were with staff, we were sending out simultaneously communication to families so that they would know what was happening. There was a set of communication that went to the families at Hoover, Keller, Bancroft, and Stevens. And there was another set of communication that went out to the families of elementary dual language students. And that was to ensure that they also didn't hear about it through the grapevine, but received really factual information. You heard the parent caregiver meetings. Monday we were at Hoover, Tuesday we were at Keller. Continued through Dr. On and others. We're out providing staff support meetings. On Friday, 2 sessions, last Friday at Hoover, to be able to, at the individual level, to really work with staff to understand their rights and things that might be available to them. Knowing that is, again, like with students, there are sometimes individual needs and individual requests. And so we want to handle that with care by providing that individualized support for our staff. We do have some follow-up parent meetings scheduled. Those were communicated already with our families in the letters last week, and we'll continue to publicize that. The follow-up parent meetings are going to be a couple of purposes. One, we'll be back out at Hoover in early January to actually handhold as needed and guide families around the completion of that prioritized school of choice process, if they so choose to do that, and to give more information about Bancroft. We'll actually also, a week after that, I believe, be going to Bancroft and actually inviting all of those Hoover families to come with us to do a little bit of a tour, to meet Dr. Booker, to do a little bit of a tour of the campus, just so they can kind of, that helps for students and staff and families to feel a little bit more comfortable. We also have meetings scheduled with elementary dual language families, opportunities for those who might just want to know more about the transition to Hoover. I don't think I said this out loud, but the transition for Keller will happen in the 27-28 school year. So Keller will stay in place for next year. That will allow the modernization that's happening at Bancroft to be completed, and that when the Keller school moves over, it will move over to a completely modernized, renovated campus. And the last thing I'll just say here, and then we'll open it up for questions, comments. The last thing I'll say is, through Mr. Miranda's support, we're really thinking about, and to your point, I think earlier, Dr. Benitez, how do we even better support the accessibility of the new Hoover location for all of our families? And so we've just started conversations with Long Beach Transit. We already supply, through support, the bus passes for families to be able to access public transportation. But now we're working with Long Beach Transit to say, how might we maximize routes from some of our communities that have a dual language elementary program? There are probably some already in place that are kind of a direct route, maybe a one bus route for students. But where there isn't a one bus route, might we be able to work with Long Beach Transit to even restructure, reorder, reroute, if you will, some of the current routes that they have, just to make it a little bit easier for our families to get to that Hoover location. Dr. Brady, anything you would add?
I was just going to add one just opportunity to express appreciation for the city of Lakewood. And President Craighead has held long relationships with members, elected officials in the city of Lakewood. And so I had direct outreach on behalf of the board and the district at the end of last week, which just want to express my appreciation to them, to Todd Rogers specifically. Hoover falls in his direct area. And we'll collaborate together on, I know there were some acknowledgement of concerns about traffic and things like that, and just really appreciate the opportunity to work directly with Councilperson Rogers and the rest of the city council and the general manager too.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. You actually reminded me of one other thing. So when we were out at our schools on Monday and Tuesday, we were collecting questions from the community. We're putting together an FAQ document. We know that not all families were able to be there on Monday and Tuesday. So we're putting together an FAQ document. Ms. Lamelli, principal at Keller, sent out the Q&A, the question survey, if you will, to families today that maybe weren't able to be there last night. So we're still that form is still open for people to submit their questions, and we'll get a Q&A out to families by next week so that they know, so everybody knows kind of some of the things that are being asked and some of the answers we have currently. So with that, we'll open it up to any questions you may have.
Brian, David, thank you, and the briefings were extremely helpful as well. So I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question about transportation, Brian, given that I think for some families, transportation is going to be a huge consideration, right? Is there any thinking from you and or the team around what if if anything can be done for parents that have multiple students in our district or children and want to accompany on the bus, a student. Two levels. One is for the other kids, if they're making rounds to multiple schools, but also for the parent, right? Because then the transportation becomes a burden in terms of costs that they have to pay for themselves, in the rerouting, let's say, of the transit. So any consideration or thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're very sensitive to transportation needs of families. I'm going to just go back to a couple of maps, and what's interesting about this, we could pull up maps for every one of our schools, and you would see plots like this, where students from our entire community are going to those schools. We have a robust choice where kids are going all over. So I don't want to minimize what you're saying because I think it is real and we need to consider that. But we also already have and so here's Bancroft. You can see the red dots all throughout. Here's Hoover all throughout. And then we show the one for Keller. So again, not minimizing that because that is a real need. But I think our families, and many of them, not all, but many of them are finding ways through public transportation that we're providing the passes to and other means for them to get there. And then what we want to do is how do we make that even more accessible? So to your point, if there was a family wanting Hoover for dual language middle school, maybe we can help them choice into O'Reilly down the street, right? Maybe there's another along the way that might be supportive to them. And those would be things that probably through parents' own selection of schools through the choice process they're thinking about. But we definitely want to be responsive, especially for Hoover as we're thinking about creating something that's a little more centralized. Anything you'd add to that?
Brian referenced the Go Pass that's offered up to every one of our students and families a few times there. And there's a metric that just hit my desk yesterday, so I want to share it with you all. So over the course of the fiscal year, right, the past 5 months, they track boardings, how many times a student or family members jumps on a bus. The number is over 750,000 boardings over a 5-month stretch. So they're using it, right? They're using it. So I was really pleased to see the information. I'm going to continue to track it on a regular basis and share it with the board. But that was telling as well.
That's huge.
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Miller, did you have a question or something?
Yeah, well, first off, I wanted to thank you for the presentation. Again, obviously, we've been partially briefed before this meeting, and so a lot of at least my initial questions have somewhat been resolved, but I think one of the things that I felt was important to be brought up in this space that wasn't really talked about in our meeting was the importance around operational efficiency. I think that you already highlighted it as one of the biggest takeaways from this decision. I couldn't help but think about how many campuses we had during our most heavily impacted time as a district, right? I think at one point we had over 100,000 students in the Long Beach Unified School District, or really, really close, right? And if I'm not mistaken, 97,000. And at that time, we had, 85 campuses, right? And now we're 25 years removed from that time period, but now we look back at our same portfolio where we've seen a reduction of over 30+%, and yet we're still at, if not very close to, the same number of campuses. And like in any household, if you've got the kiddos who are moving out and it's time for the grandparents to start thinking about how we get more efficient, right? And the same thing's going on with the Long Beach Unified School District, where when we think about all of the financial difficulties that could be on the horizon, it's important for us to start to look at ways that we can be a little bit more efficient with our resources, with our teachers, with the support staff, et cetera. And I think that this plan not only captures the operational efficiency that we need to be prudent with these resources, but it also has the benefit of having more students being able to take advantage of one of our greatest programs within the district, which is our dual immersion. So I was just very, very appreciative of that, and I couldn't, after leaving our meeting, I couldn't help but think about that transition that we've had over the past
20 some odd years. And so I just felt that that was an important thing that needed to be brought up.
Yeah, and in fact, so most of you on the board, your experience with school closures is Hoover this year, last year with Hudson. But if we go back 10 years, we have been in some way trying to keep up with the decline. So we go back to Burroughs Elementary, Monroe, K-8, DeMille, even going back further than that. Probably others that Tucker was an elementary school that closed. So we have, I think, over the last 15, 20 years, tried to sort of keep up with that, but we're probably a little behind in the keeping up, and there will be more of these likely. If the enrollment trend continues, which we anticipate it will, we will need to continue to keep up. And it's never fun and it's never easy. Yeah. But it is the right thing to do from a fiscal management of resources.
And I appreciate everyone's comments thus far in regards to being sensitive about this transition, because heck, as a Long Beach Unified School District graduate myself, man, I'm Bixby Beaver to the heart, and I'm always going to be a Stanford Hawk, and I'll always be a Milliken Ram, and we have a certain level of pride and ownership of that campus, even though obviously we don't have true ownership. And there are people who have graduated from the Hoovers and the Kellers of the world, and they'll always have that place in their heart. And so we want to be very cognizant of that. And so all things considered, I appreciate you all taking the proper communication steps and I guess the empathy that's needed to be had. So thank you.
Well, thank you, because I was going to mention something very similar, that even though we know that we are responding to the educational needs of the district, that we are sensitive and acknowledge that this will be a hardship for the Hoover families as we transition. But thank you very much for reaching out to the different communities and providing all the information. And it's a lot to be handled at one time. So thank you. That's an information item. We will take action at a later date. And we are now at report of board members. So Mr. Miller, we'll start with you.
All right, it's getting late, so I'll be brief. I had an opportunity to meet with the parents of the ELAC group over at Roosevelt Elementary just before the holidays, and I just really wanted to thank them for the opportunity to speak, but more importantly, the topic that we addressed. Ironically, it was a lot of what we talked about today in regards to, they asked me to come to the campus and talk about the importance of being present. And often when I talk about attendance, or if the topic of attendance comes up, I speak to the time period of the pandemic, where though we did our best to try and support young men and young women in their academic growth, we recognized right away that nothing replaces the brick and mortar of a classroom, and being present and having that one-to-one human connection with a teacher. And so as we continue to support our young people and their growth, them being present and at the school site more than 95% of the time is going to be one of the greatest tools to help support those efforts. But as I shared those pieces, there were obviously some major topics that came up. One was the large community concerns of the kidnappings that have been occurring by ICE agents. I once again reiterated the district's stance in the sharing of not only the policy that was approved, but also the processes and trainings that have been shared by staff. We also had a conversation about the current rash of illnesses that were going around. I know half the district team caught a little bit of a bug. I caught a bug too. I don't want to point in the elbow. No, I'm kidding. No, it didn't have anything to do with my illness. I probably caught it from my daughter, but I too ended up catching a little bit of a bug. All things considered, we would obviously want people to keep their distance if they are suffering from an illness at the time. But all things considered, they brought that up as well. And so I'm sharing all of this to say that as we talk about the importance of attendance, I know that this is already something that's being said, but I just felt that it was important to be here. Also making sure that we carry that heightened level of empathy around the fears and concerns that have been happening in our city around the kidnappings that we've already discussed, and also just some of the illnesses that have been going on as well, right? We are obviously going to continue to push for 95%, but if you are feeling sick, if you got a cough, you got a cold, you got somebody who has COVID, if you are immune compromised, then please take the time to step away, as we want you to be safe. That'll be the end of my report.
Thank you. Dr. Benitez?
Thank you, President Craighead. I want to give a special shout out, and I saw them here earlier. I didn't think they were going to stay to the end of the meeting, but to Long Beach Pride, Chris Duvali and the team from Long Beach Pride were here. I want to thank them for providing 50 full Thanksgiving dinners last 2 weeks ago. When I mean full, like dinners for 12, 27-pound turkeys with all the fixings and trimmings. And they wanted to make sure that those dinners made their way to LBUSD students and families. And because our district was on break, I also want to give a big shout out to Days Long Beach and Long Beach Forward, who work very closely with our schools to make sure that those dinners got to the students and the families. So thank you, Chris Duvall. If you can send me names of who was involved, I'd be happy at our next board report to shout out. So entire Long Beach Pride family. I do have an ask of our superintendent. So for a future meeting, given the tough budget scenario that's been laid out, and and props to you and the district team for keeping our communities abreast through our budget update communications. But given that these budget scenarios are very closely connected to our ongoing decline in enrollments, I mean, we just had a whole presentation, multiple presentations today, and the impacts of our decline in enrollments, including but not limited to school closures. In relation to that, I would love to hear at a future meeting our district's thinking and/or conversations on potentially partnering to develop affordable housing opportunities. And then again, given the housing crisis that we have here locally, we talked about affordability, particularly within the context of the Long Beach Housing Promise that was referenced earlier today. So love at a future meeting if we could get something. It doesn't have to be a formal presentation, but just to see where housing development fits into these longer term plans, considering again budget, declining enrollments, and potential school closures.
I'm not going to address the agenda item itself, but just to say that Dave Miranda, he's left the room
Yeah,
now.
I was hoping that he would
next
save
week,
that.
or maybe it's this week, I can't remember, is doing a presentation with a team up in Los Angeles. Oh, it happened today. Okay. So this week. In the meantime, I can get the slides that would be at least for the board to see what the team that included City of Long Beach, Long Beach City College, Cal State Long Beach, what they were presenting about, so you could have that information.
Okay, thank you. And then I would ask, Madam Chair, if we can end tonight's meeting in honor and memory of Porfirio Gandaria Olivares, or as his family affectionately knew him as La Purina, as he was known by his loved ones. This is the husband of Lilia Ocampo, father of current LBUSD students and LBUSD alum. Lilia Ocampo and the children, like I said, attend and continue to attend LBUSD, and that family has given so much to our district that I would ask us to adjourn tonight in honor of Porfirio Gandaria Olivares.
Thank you. Mr. Otto?
So last week I was in Sacramento for the California School Board Association conference, 5 days, and it was a very, very inspiring conference. There was a lot going on. I'd completely forgotten about the fact that they had several sessions on educational housing and what different districts are doing. I know Santa Clara a while ago had built housing that was successful, and it seems to be a growing trend. Money seems to be made available. Problems with permits and whatnot are going away to encourage that kind of, so that was a good thing to learn at that conference. I sat and watched each of the candidates for Superintendent of Public Instruction talk about what it was that they wanted to do. The good news is there are a lot of them. The bad news is that none of them were that impressive, and we'll see what happens going forward. My biggest takeaway was that they had a very good presentation on legal issues affecting K through 12 districts, and also a very good presentation on advocacy, what's going on, what needs to be going on at the legislative level, not only in California, but nationally as well. And my best takeaway on that was that it's all on Gamut. And I knew about Gamut, but I hadn't used it, and I went up to Patrick O'Donnell, who used to be our city council person, chair of the committee, and who I've known for years and years and years. And after these presentations, I said, "Are there slides available?" And he looked at me like, "They're all on Gamut. Why don't you just go to Gamut? Don't bother me." And so I did. I can, and what I'm going to do is put together a report that has that information available for all of us, so that we can use that as a tool in the future, and we can teach people on how to do that. So I thought it was a very productive meeting. The only downside was that they billed me for one extra night for the room that I stayed in, but we're solving that right away. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about briefly was the report to the community. As you know, I am working on a January 27th date at Rancho Los Alamitos. I've spoken to both the city council person from the 5th District, Daryl Supernow, who wants to help in however he can. He said he can give me contact information for not only the PPA people, but the leadership people, and I can reach out to them. But he also gave me the name of a guy who I can't remember right now, but I dictated a little memo on it, who's a social is on social media, who's well known in the 5th District, and who says he was happy to help us make the event well known in the community. And understand, there's two parts to this in my mind. You got to get people there, and then you got to tell them what we're doing, which is to update them on how we're doing on our board goals and guardrails, and get their feedback from that. But we want to have a real good turnout to begin to do that. I also reached out to Christina Duggan, who is the council person from the 3rd District, and in fact on Friday, after I got back from Sacramento, spoke to her leadership group about what we were doing, what we intended to do, and was promised contact information for everybody in that group, and all the PTA people that she knows as well. And so we'll have a good ability to outreach to people, so we can tell them what we're doing, and hopefully get some positive feedback. I expect to be able to, with those contacts, to get out not only to the PTA, but to parents, teachers, community leaders in those areas. And Rancho Los Alamitos is a great draw on a Tuesday night for this meeting, and so I'm looking forward to that. And one, I haven't eliminated you entirely as my backup person, but Eric's been lobbying me to do this.
That is not a true statement.
Well, you said you were available at that. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so that's my report.
Thank you. Ms. Lopez?
Well, this message is for our wonderful students. Students, in life, You'll often face situations where doing the right thing may not be the popular choice. It can be difficult to stand apart from the crowd, especially when it seems like everyone else is doing something different than you. But remember, just because something is popular doesn't mean it's right. True character is shown when you stand firm in your values, even when it's not the easiest path. Sometimes standing up for what you believe in is a challenge, but it is also what builds your character and integrity. It's always important to ask yourself, is this right? Rather than simply following the majority. Popularity is fleeting, but the choices you make and the way you carry yourself and the way you carry yourself with honesty and respect will last. Don't let the fear of not fitting in hold you back from doing what is right. Trust that in the end, it will be your integrity and your courage to make the right choices that will shape the person you're becoming. So stay true to yourself, even when it's not the popular thing to do. The world needs more people who are willing to stand for what is right, no matter the cost. And I hope you take this message, students, because it's not easy to stand or do things that may not be the popular. But just remember this. What is popular doesn't mean that it's right, and doing what is right may mean that it's not popular. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you. I'll just make this quick. I also attended the CSBA conference in Sacramento, and I'll just add a couple of things to what Mr. Otto said, and that would be there's a lot of talk coming from CSBA about closing the achievement gap, and that fits right in line with what we're doing with our board goals. And they're referring to it as CTAG, close the achievement gap. That was one theme of the conference. And then another idea coming out of the conference was for stabilizing school funding. And that would be CSBA advocating for a funding formula based on enrollment as opposed to the funding formula based on ADA or average daily attendance. So a lot of good information, a good event. So Dr. Baker.
Thank you. So speaking of attendance, I'd like to start my report tonight by acknowledging our middle schools. So Mr. Samuels, you can amplify my expression of appreciation. The district, the 15 middle schools, every single one of them have improved their chronic absenteeism. And I want to acknowledge specifically 5 who have reduced chronic absenteeism between 8 and 12%, which is huge. So specific shout out, everybody has improved, but specific shout out to Franklin Middle School, Hamilton Middle School, Nelson Middle School, Stevens Middle School, and Washington Middle School, all of whom have significantly reduced their chronic absenteeism. And I'm most excited about that because what it means for learning for students. And secondly, we have got to get our attendance up so it has a positive impact on our budget. Like to acknowledge Sato's 4th place achievement at the World Drone Soccer Championships in Shanghai, China, where 28 teams from 18 countries competed. So we are international in our achievement through Sato's drone soccer team. Wonderful news to see that accomplishment, so special. And then tonight, actually, while we're sitting in the boardroom, was the last of the high school site nights. Beautiful energy, lots of wonderful attendance all over the place. I know we have an attendee on our board for your own student and others who attended across our district site nights. I was at Poly yesterday and got a glimpse at the schedule that they did. I wasn't there for site night, but got to hear all about it. Just a wonderful opportunity for our students to talk to other students and for us just to see the best of what is available across Long Beach Unified School District, and just so thankful for all of the students and staff who make those evenings so special. Wonderful. Also would like to, while I was at Poly, two of my student advisors came over and wanted to talk about an event that they're hosting on Saturday on campus. It's a local holiday celebration. They have collected food items as well as toys and things. So between 10 and 1, there will be younger students on campus led by our older students. Also on Saturday, we have, in partnership with the City of Long Beach, a Kwanzaa experience at Houghton Park from 10 to 3, and just want to encourage families to attend that. And then last, as part of my report tonight, want to express appreciation to Dr. Lee, Executive Officer at the Personnel Commission, along with Commissioners Vaughn, Yulashevsky, and Bender. They just posted their annual report on their web page, the Personnel Commission web page, and tremendous highlights of service to those who are coming into our district or needing support, changing jobs, wanting information about jobs for classified service. So hundreds of our current employees go through the Personnel Commission. And so just if you're interested, please access that annual report. I know the board received it, but it is there for our community as well to see the work of our Personnel Commission. And with that in mind, that is the end of my report.
Thank you. Well, to our Jewish community, happy and healthy Hanukkah. Hanukkah starts on Sunday, but that does conclude the regular business of this meeting. Our next meeting will be 1 week from today, so December 17th. And if there's no objection, we'll adjourn. Thank you, everyone.